Picture yourself standing at the bottom of the world. Here, the horizon does not simply end. It dissolves. There is no separation between the white of the earth and the white of the sky. There is only the white darkness. A void so vast, so complete, that human eyes struggle to comprehend it. If you were to stand here, on the high polar plateau, the first thing you would notice is not the cold. It is the silence. It is a silence so profound, so heavy, that you can hear the blood rushing in your own ears. It is a silence that has lasted for 30 million years. To us, in the modern world, Antarctica is a blank space at the bottom of our maps. It is a footnote, a jagged white shape that we ignore. We think of it as a dead place, a graveyard of ice where nothing lives and nothing changes. But we are wrong. Beneath your feet, separated by 2 miles of crushing, solid ice, lies a landscape that tells a different story. There are mountains down there, the Gamburtsev Mountains, ghost peaks that rival the European Alps in size, yet no human eye has ever seen them. They are entombed in crystal, preserved exactly as they were eons ago. There are rivers down there, hundreds of them, liquid water flowing in the dark, connecting massive glacial lakes that have been sealed off from the rest of the planet for 15 million years. And if the whispers of geology and ancient cartography are to be believed, there is memory down there. Tonight, I invite you to leave the noise of the modern world behind. Let your shoulders drop, unclench your jaw, and let your mind drift south, past the chaotic oceans, past the tip of South America, past the roaring winds of the Drake Passage. Drift with me into the quiet. We are going to journey into the past. Not the past written in textbooks, but the past written in the ice itself. You see, ice is not just frozen water. Ice is a library. When snow falls in Antarctica, it does not melt. It accumulates. Layer upon layer, year upon year, century upon century, the weight of the new snow compresses the old snow into ice. And in that ice, tiny bubbles of air are trapped. Those bubbles are time capsules. They contain the atmosphere of the Earth from the year they fell. A breath of air from the Roman Empire. A breath of air from the time of the pharaohs. A breath of air from the day the dinosaurs died. Scientists drill into this ice, pulling up slender cylinders, ice cores that stretch back 800,000 years. They read these cores like the pages of a holy book. But there are some pages that science struggles to read, and there are some pages that seem to have been ripped out entirely. Why do maps drawn in the 1500s show this continent without its ice? How did ancient mariners know the shape of rivers that are now buried under miles of glaciers? And what are we to make of the strange anomalies that satellites are beginning to spot as the ice shelves retreat? These are not questions for the daylight. These are questions for the night, for the time when our minds are open to possibilities that the harsh light of day would burn away. The story of Antarctica is the story of a lost epoch. It is the story of a time when the world was different, a time when this frozen wasteland was a paradise of green forests and temperate winds. Science admits this freely. We know for a fact that palm trees once swayed near the South Pole. We know that massive reptiles once walked where blizzards now rage. The fossils are there, etched into the rock, waiting. But the question, the dangerous, beautiful question, is this: if the animals were there, and the forests were there, was someone else there too? Did a civilization rise and fall on this continent long before history began? Did they look up at the southern stars and map the world? And did they vanish, frozen in a single, cataclysmic night, leaving only their shadows behind? To answer this, we must peel back the layers. We must descend, mentally, through the ice. Imagine the ice sheet not as a floor, but as a ceiling of glass that blurs the world below. For centuries, explorers threw themselves against this ceiling. They died in the cold, trying to reach the pole, trying to conquer the blank space on the map. Shackleton, Scott, Amundsen, they were heroes of the Ice Age, but they were walking on top of the mystery. They were skimming the surface of the vault. Tonight, we unlock it. The journey begins with a paradox. To understand the hidden history of Antarctica, we must first understand how impossible its discovery really was. According to official history, the continent was first sighted in 1820. A Russian expedition, a British captain, an American sealer, they all claimed to see it around the same time. That is incredibly recent. By 1820, the chaotic cities of London and Paris were industrial powerhouses. Steam engines were puffing. The American Revolution was a memory. The world was mapped, colonized, and categorized. And yet, a landmass larger than Europe sat at the bottom of the world, completely unknown. Or so we are told. Because if no one knew it was there until 1820, why does it appear on maps drawn 300 years earlier? This is where the silence of the ice begins to speak. Let's move our attention to the year 1929, the dusty archives of the Topkapı Palace in Istanbul, Turkey, a place of minarets and secrets. A German theologian is sifting through bundles of disregarded parchment. He pulls out a map drawn on the skin of a gazelle. It is torn. It is faded. The date on the map corresponds to the year 1513. It is signed by an admiral of the Ottoman Navy, a man named Piri Reis. The theologian unfolds the gazelle skin. He sees the familiar coast of Africa. He sees the coast of Brazil, drawn with surprising accuracy. But then his eye travels south, down past the tip of Argentina, down into the ocean where nothing should exist but open water. There, drawn with careful, deliberate ink strokes, is a coastline. It shows bays. It shows rivers flowing into the sea. It shows mountain ranges. The theologian realizes, with a shiver, that he is looking at the coast of Queen Maud, land apart of Antarctica. But on this map, there is no ice. The coastline corresponds perfectly to the seismic profile of the land underneath the glaciers. This is knowledge that we, with all our modern technology, only confirmed in the mid-20th century using ground-penetrating radar. How? How could an Ottoman admiral in 1513 paint the portrait of a continent that wouldn't be discovered for another 300 years? And more hauntingly, how could he paint it as it looked before the ice took over? Piri Reis offered a clue. In the margins of the map, he wrote a note. He did not claim to survey the land himself. He was an honest man. He wrote that he compiled his map from 20 older source maps, some from the days of Alexander the Great. Some, he claimed, were even older. Fragments of a lost geography. This gazelle, skin parchment, is the first crack in the official story. It suggests that someone, long ago, sailed these waters when they were warm. It suggests that human history does not travel in a straight line from primitive to advanced. It suggests a circle, a cycle, a rise and a fall. As you lie there, listening to the wind outside your own window, imagine the wind of that ancient Antarctica. It is not a biting, freezing gale. It is a breeze. It smells of pine needles and damp earth. The sun is setting, casting long, golden shadows over a mountain range that is now buried under 2 miles of ice. Who is watching that sunset? Is it merely a penguin, a seal, or is it a man? Is he standing on the deck of a ship, holding an astrolabe, charting the stars? To find him, we must look deeper than the maps. We must look at the land itself. Because before Antarctica was a mystery, it was a home. Science calls this period the Eocene, a time of dawn, 50 million years ago, not so long in the grand clock of geology. In the Eocene, the world was warmer, CO2 levels were high, and Antarctica was a rainforest. I want you to visualize this clearly. Erase the white. Paint the world green. Giant ferns the size of trees, unfurling in the mist. Nothofagus trees, southern beaches, creating a dense canopy. We know this because we found them. Near the Beardmore Glacier, one of the most remote and inhospitable places on Earth, scientists stumbled upon something that shouldn't be there. They found fossilized roots. They found impressions of leaves. They found pollen. These weren't just random scraps of biology. They were evidence of a thriving, complex ecosystem. The temperature in this Antarctic rainforest would have averaged around 55 degrees Fahrenheit, so 13 degrees Celsius. Cool, misty, temperate, similar to the forests of New Zealand or the Pacific Northwest of America today. In the summers, the sun would circle the sky, never setting, bathing the green valleys in 24 hours of light. Plants would grow with explosive speed, fueled by the endless day. In the winters, the sun would vanish. Darkness would fall for months. But the ocean currents were warm then. They wrapped the continent in a thermal blanket, keeping the frost at bay. The forests would sleep in the dark, waiting for the dawn. It was a habitable world, a sanctuary, and if you look at the timeline of humanity, the dates become uncomfortable. Official history tells us that Homo sapiens, us, have only been around for 200,000 to 300,000 years, a blink of an eye. But the timeline of the ice is tricky. We are told the ice sheet formed 34 million years ago, but recent studies, controversial studies, suggest that the ice sheet is dynamic, that it waxes and wanes, that there may have been periods, much more recently, where the ice retreated, periods that align with the rise of early humans. Could there have been a window, a warm interglacial period, perhaps 50,000 years ago, or 100,000 years ago, a time when the northern hemisphere was locked in an ice age, covered in glaciers, but Antarctica was a refuge. Think about the logic of migration. When the north gets cold, life moves south. If the northern world was freezing, where would the smartest, most capable humans go? They would follow the warmth. They would follow the birds. They would follow the stars to the southern sanctuary. Maybe they didn't just survive there. Maybe they thrived. Maybe, in the isolation of the deep south, separated from the chaotic tribes of the north, they built something different. Something distinct. And maybe, just maybe, they were the ones who drew the source maps that Piri Reis would copy thousands of years later. But if they were there, where did they go? A civilization leaves marks, it leaves stone, it leaves metal, it leaves bone. Antarctica has given us none of these. Or has it? The problem is the ice. The ice is a barrier, yes, but it is also a broom. Glaciers move. They flow like slow motion rivers of sandpaper. They grind mountains into dust. They scour the bedrock clean. If a city stood in Antarctica 100,000 years ago, the glaciers would have bulldozed it into the ocean long ago. Or they would have buried it. Deep in the valleys, protected by the geography, covered softly by the first snows that never melted, preserved. This is the haunting possibility that keeps researchers awake at night, that the evidence isn't destroyed. It is simply hidden, waiting for us to develop the technology to see through the ice. And now we have that technology. Satellites equipped with LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar, gravimetric sensors that can detect density changes deep underground. And what they are finding is unsettling anomalies. Shapes that are too straight to be natural. Magnetic signatures that look like massive metal deposits. Heat sources melting the ice from below. We are going to examine these anomalies one by one. We are going to look at the pyramids of the Ellsworth Range. We are going to look at the massive magnetic disturbance near Lake Vostok. But first, we must understand the spirit of the place. Antarctica does not welcome visitors. It defends itself. The winds here can reach 200 miles per hour. The temperature can drop to minus 128 degrees Fahrenheit. It is a fortress of nature. Why would nature build such a fortress unless there was something to protect? As we drift deeper into this story, remember that we are walking the line between science and myth. We will respect the hard data, but we will also listen to the legends, because sometimes legends are just history that forgot its own name. Let the image of the green Antarctica fade. Let the white return. We are back on the ice. The wind is low. The stars are overhead, the Southern Cross burning bright in the velvet sky. We are standing at the threshold of the vault. The key is in the lock. Let's turn it. To understand what was lost, we must first understand what was there. We often think of Antarctica as eternal, a place that has always been dead, white, and frozen. But the memory of the Earth is long, and the ice is, in geological terms, a recent visitor. If you were to strip away the ice sheet today, melt it all down into the rising oceans, you would not find a flat, barren wasteland underneath. You would find a continent of dramatic contours, deep valleys, soaring peaks, archipelagos of islands that look like a shattered puzzle. But we don't need to melt the ice to know this. The continent has already confessed its secret. It happened in 1912, during one of the most tragic expeditions in history. Captain Robert Falcon Scott and his men were fighting their way back from the South Pole. They were starving. They were frostbitten. They were dragging sledges that weighed hundreds of pounds through a living hell of snow. They knew they were dying. Every step was a battle against gravity and despair. And yet, even as they marched toward their deaths, they stopped to pick up rocks. On the Beardmore Glacier, a massive river of ice that cuts through the transantarctic mountains, Scott's party found something that made them pause. Embedded in the black rock, amidst the most inhospitable freeze on Earth, was a fossil. It was a leaf. Specifically, it was a leaf from a Glossopteris tree, a fern-like plant that grows in warm, wet soil. Think of the irony. These men were freezing to death, their bodies shutting down from the cold, while holding in their hands the proof that this very spot was once a lush, warm forest. They dragged 35 pounds of these rocks with them to the very end. When their bodies were found months later, frozen in their tent, the rocks were still beside them. They died protecting the evidence of a green Antarctica. That leaf was a message from the Eocene. Let us go back there now. Dissolve the ice. Let the white fade into a vibrant, deep emerald. The year is 50 million BC. You are standing in the same spot where Scott died. But the air is thick and humid. It smells of peat moss and decomposing leaves. It smells of life. The silence of the ice is gone. Instead, the air is filled with the buzz of insects. Dragonflies with wingspans like hawks dart through the mist. You are standing in a dense, temperate rainforest. Towering southern beech trees, Nothofagus, stretch up toward the pale sky. Their roots are not gripping permafrost. They are sinking deep into rich, dark soil. Ferns cover the forest floor, creating a soft, green carpet. Listen closely. Do you hear water? Not the crack of freezing ice, but the sound of a rushing river. Water is flowing freely here. It cascades down from the mountains, carving canyons through the rock, feeding wetlands that teem with amphibians. This is not a fantasy. This is the scientific reality of Antarctica. Paleontologists have found the fossilized pollen of palm trees in the sediment. Palm trees, the ultimate symbol of the tropics, growing on the continent of the South Pole. How is this possible? Critics often dismiss the idea of an Antarctic civilization by saying, it's too cold. No one could live there. But they are looking at the now. They are not looking at the then. During the Eocene thermal maximum, the Earth was in a greenhouse state. Carbon dioxide levels were high. The planet was warm. But more importantly, the ocean currents were different. Today, Antarctica is surrounded by the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, a cold, swirling vortex of ocean water that spins around the continent, trapping the cold in and keeping the warmth out. It acts like a thermal wall. But back then, that current didn't exist. Warm water from the equator flowed all the way south, bathing the shores of Antarctica in heat. It was a paradise at the bottom of the world, and it wasn't just plants. In 2011, scientists on Seymour Island, off the Antarctic Peninsula, found a fossil that changed the picture again. It wasn't a leaf. It was a bone. It was a hip bone. It belonged to a mammal. A hoofed creature, specifically. Something large grazing on the vegetation. If there were large mammals, there were predators. If there were predators, there was a complex food chain. The implications are staggering. We often assume that for a civilization to rise, it needs certain conditions. It needs fresh water. It needs timber for building. It needs a mild climate for agriculture. Antarctica had all of these. It had massive forests for lumber. It had the largest reserves of fresh water on the planet, flowing in liquid rivers. It had a climate that, while dark in the winter, was mild enough to support complex life. In fact, the winter darkness might have been the catalyst for advancement. Imagine a species living here. For 6 months of the year, they have endless daylight. They can build, travel, and farm with unlimited visibility. But then the twilight comes. The sun dips below the horizon and does not return for months. How do you survive the long night? You build shelters. You muster fire. You develop astronomy to track the stars, which become your only clock in the darkness. You develop a society that relies on cooperation, because in the dark, you cannot survive alone. The darkness forces you to become sophisticated. Perhaps this is why the Piri Reis map shows the coastline so accurately. If you lived in a world of darkness for half the year, the stars would not just be pretty lights. They would be your gods. They would be your map. You would understand the geometry of the heavens better than anyone living at the equator. But there is something else down there, something bigger than forests. There is a geography that has been hidden from us, which would have been the perfect cradle for this lost society. Let's travel deeper into the interior, to the very center of the East Antarctic ice sheet. On the surface, it is a flat, featureless plateau of white. It looks like the emptiest place on Earth. But in 2009, a team of scientists from 6 nations launched a project called AGAP. They flew aircraft equipped with ice-penetrating radar back and forth over this desolate region. They were looking for the bedrock. They expected to find a flat plain, smoothed down by the weight of the glaciers. Instead, the radar returned an image that shocked them. On the screens, jagged lines appeared, spikes, valleys, cliffs, buried under 2 miles of ice. Totally invisible from the surface is a mountain range the size of the European Alps. They are called the Gamburtsev Mountains. The Ghost Mountains. They stretch for 750 miles. Their peaks rise to 9,000 feet, nearly 2 miles high, yet they are still completely covered by the ice sheet. Think about that. A mountain range as grand as the Rockies or the Alps, existing entirely in secret. In the Green Era, these mountains would have been majestic. Picture them, snow-capped peaks rising out of the temperate rainforests, deep, sheltered valleys between the ranges, protected from the coastal winds. These valleys would have been the perfect location for a settlement. They are high up, safe from flooding. They are protected by the peaks. They have access to the river systems that flow down to the sea. If I were looking for a place to build a hidden sanctuary, Shangri-La, at the bottom of the world, I would build it in the valleys of the Gamburtsev Mountains. And the radar shows us something else. It shows that the valleys of the Gamburtsevs look preserved. Usually, when a glacier moves over a mountain, it grinds the sharp peaks down. It rounds them off. It erodes the landscape. But the Gamburtsev peaks are sharp. They are jagged. They look like young mountains. This tells geologists that the ice sheet formed incredibly quickly. It didn't slowly erode the mountains over millions of years. It snapped into place. It frozen the landscape, sealing it in a protective tomb. This brings us to the most unsettling theory of all. We are taught that the Ice Age came slowly, a gradual cooling over thousands of years, a slow creep of glaciers. But the preservation of the Gamburtsev peaks suggests something faster. Something sudden. What if the green Antarctica didn't fade away? What if it was turned off? What if the lush rainforests, the flowing rivers, and whatever lived among them were caught in a sudden cataclysm? A flash freeze that locked the continent in stasis before the decay could set in. If that happened, then the ruins of that time would not be ground to dust. They would be frozen, intact, standing in the dark, under 2 miles of ice, waiting. We have found the leaves. We have found the mountains. We have proven the climate. The stage is set. The environment was there. The resources were there. The sanctuary was there. So, where are the people? To find them, we cannot look at the ground anymore. The ground is buried. We must look at the only thing that survived the ice. The knowledge. We must look at the maps, because if no one was there to see the rivers of Queen Maud Land, then why are they drawn on a piece of gazelle skin in a Turkish museum? Who saw the rivers before they froze? The answer requires us to look at history not as a straight line, but as a puzzle with missing pieces. And the biggest missing piece is shaped exactly like Antarctica. Let us leave the ghost mountains behind. Let us travel forward in time, but north in space, to the age of exploration, where a secret was being passed from sailor to sailor, a secret about a land that did not exist. The impossible geography, the transition from nature to humanity, is delicate. We move from the tangible, leaves and rocks, to the intangible. Ink, lines, memory. In 1960, a professor named Charles Hapgood turned his attention to the Piri Reis map. Hapgood was not a fringe theorist, he was an academic, a historian who had caught the attention of Albert Einstein. Hapgood noticed something about the map that others had missed. It wasn't just that it showed Antarctica. It was the projection. Maps are attempts to draw a round world on a flat piece of paper. To do this, you need mathematics. You need a projection method. Modern maps use the Mercator projection, but the Piri Reis map used something different. It seemed to be based on a projection centered on Cairo, Egypt. But here is the catch. To draw a map with this level of accuracy, utilizing spherical trigonometry, you need to know the circumference of the Earth within a remarkably small margin of error. You need to know longitude. Calculating longitude requires a precise chronometer, a clock that keeps perfect time at sea. We, in our modern history, did not invent such a clock until the late 18th century, Harrison's chronometer. Before that, sailors guessed. They used dead reckoning. They were often miles off course. Yet, the Piri Reis map and the source maps it relied on placed the coastline of South America and Africa in the correct longitudinal relationship. It was mathematically impossible for 1513. It would be like finding a diagram of a jet engine sketched in a Leonardo da Vinci notebook. You can argue it's a coincidence, or you can accept that the knowledge came from somewhere else. Hapgood wrote to the US Air Force. He asked the cartography section at Westover Air Force Base to analyze the southern portion of the Piri Reis map. He wanted to know, does this map truly show the coast of Antarctica under the ice? Lieutenant Colonel Harold Z. Ohlmeyer, the commander, wrote back. His letter is a matter of public record. The letter stated, in plain military language, the geographical detail shown in the lower part of the map agrees very remarkably with the results of the seismic profile made across the top of the ice, capped by the Swedish-British Antarctic expedition of 1949. This indicates the coastline had been mapped before it was covered by the ice. Cap. He finished with a sentence that should have shaken the foundations of history. We have no idea how the data on this map can be reconciled with the supposed state of geographical knowledge in 1513. The military admitted it. The math admitted it. Someone had mapped Queen Maud Land when it was free of ice. But when was Queen Maud Land last free of ice? According to conventional geology, not for millions of years. This creates a paradox. Either humans, advanced humans, existed millions of years ago, or the ice is much younger than we think, or there is a third option, that the civilization that mapped this coast possessed technology that allowed them to see through the ice, just as we do today. But let us stick to the simplest explanation first, that the ice was not there. If the ice was absent, say, 12,000 years ago, or even 100,000 years ago, then the map is a witness. It is a survivor testimony. And Piri Reis was not the only one. In 1531, a French geographer named Orontius Phineus drew a map of the world. On it, he depicted a massive southern continent. But unlike Piri Reis, who only showed the coast, Phineus showed the interior. He drew mountain ranges. He drew rivers originating from these mountains and flowing down into the sea. When you overlay the Phineus map with modern maps of the sub-glacial bedrock, the land under the ice, the rivers match. The Phineus map shows open valleys where today we see glaciers like the Beardmore. It shows river estuaries where today we see ice shelves. It depicts Antarctica not as an island, but as a thriving, connected landmass. Imagine the implication. To map a river, you must travel it. You must sail up its mouth. You must walk its banks. You must drink its water. Someone drank from the rivers of Antarctica. Someone watched the water flow from the gambots of peaks down to the Ross Sea. They gave names to these places. They had territories. They perhaps had borders. But their names are lost. Their borders are erased. All that remains is the shape of the land, preserved on old paper, copied by men who didn't understand what they were drawing. It is like a game of telephone played over millennia. The source maps were copied and recopied and recopied, from the Library of Alexandria to Constantinople to the desk of Piri Reis. The ink faded. The parchment crumbled, but the lines remained. The lines tell us that we are suffering from amnesia. We have forgotten a chapter of our own story, a chapter that took place in the south, and if they were mapping the rivers, were they also building by them? Civilizations love rivers, the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Indus. All the great cradles of humanity are built on riverbanks. If Antarctica had rivers, logic dictates it had settlements. And if the ice came suddenly, those settlements are still there, not grounded to dust, not scattered by the wind, but encased, like a fly in amber, down in the dark beside the dry riverbeds of the sub-glacial world. The ruins of the first civilization might be waiting, and perhaps, just perhaps, they are not as empty as we think, because in the 1930s, a group of men obsessed with the occult and the esoteric decided that they would not just look at the maps. They would go there. They believed that Antarctica was not just a lost home. They believed it was a source of power, and they were willing to cross the frozen ocean to find it. The green fades completely now. The paper maps are rolled up and put away. The wind returns, but this time it carries the sound of an engine, a steel hull breaking through the pack ice. The year is 1938, and the swastika is flying over the Southern Ocean. Before we witness the arrival of steel ships and war machines, we must acknowledge those who came before. The maps of Piri Reis and Orontius Phineas tell us that someone knew the shape of the continent. But they do not tell us who. Western history is arrogant. It assumes that if a European didn't discover it, it wasn't discovered. It assumes that the oceans were barriers, walls that could not be crossed until the invention of the caravel and the compass. But for the people of the Pacific, the master navigators of Polynesia, the ocean was not a barrier. It was a highway. Long before Columbus stumbled upon the Americas, Polynesian wayfinders were crossing thousands of miles of open ocean in double-hulled canoes. They navigated by the stars, by the swell of the waves, by the temperature of the water, and by the flight paths of birds. They held a mental map of the Pacific in their minds that was more accurate than anything drawn on paper in London or Madrid. And their oral histories, their chants of memory, speak of a voyage that went too far south. The legend dates back to the 7th century. It tells of a navigator named Yui T. Rangjora. He sailed his canoe, the Tiivio Atia, deeper into the south than any man before him. He was chasing the horizon. The chant describes what he found. He entered a place where the ocean became like arrowroot, thick, slushy, white. He described rocks that grow out of the sea. He described animals that dive deep into the caves of the ocean. And most hauntingly, he he described, place of bitter cold where the sun hides. Rocks that grow out of the sea. There is no better description for an iceberg seen by a man who has never known ice. Arrowroot Ocean, that is the slush ice, the brash ice, that forms on the surface of the polar sea. Hugh T. Randra saw Antarctica. He saw the frozen wall. But the legends hint at something else. They hint that he did not stop at the wall, that he found a way through, that he saw the land of the spirits. Did the Polynesians find the remnants of the first civilization? Did they land on the coast of Queen Maud Land when the rivers were still flowing, or just as they were beginning to freeze? We cannot know for sure. Their knowledge was not written in ink, it was written in breath, passed from father to son, fading with each generation. But the instinct to go south, that remained. It is a siren call, a magnetic pull that tugs at the soul of humanity. We are drawn to the bottom of the world as if we left something there. And in the 20th century, that pull became an obsession for a regime that was looking for more than just territory. They were looking for origins. The year is 1938. The world is holding its breath, waiting for the Second World War to begin. In Germany, the Nazi Party is at the height of its power. But their ambition is not limited to Europe. Hermann Göring, the commander of the Luftwaffe, authorizes an expedition unlike any other. It is calm, methodical, and incredibly expensive. They refit a massive freighter, the Schwabenland. They equip it with a catapult and 2 Dornier flying boats, seaplanes named Passat and Boreas. Their destination is Queen Maud Land, the very same coast depicted on the Piri Reis map. Why? The official reason was whaling. Germany needed whale oil for margarine and lubricants. They wanted to stake a claim so they wouldn't have to buy from Norway. It is a logical, boring explanation, and it makes absolutely no sense given the resources they poured into it. You do not send your best pilots, your most advanced aircraft, and your top scientists to the most dangerous continent on Earth just to secure a supply of margarine. The Schwabenland reached the ice shelf in January 1939. For weeks, the seaplanes flew over the frozen continent. They didn't just look. They claimed. They dropped thousands of metal darts, heavy aluminum rods with swastikas stamped on the top, spiking them into the ice every few miles. They were branding the land. They renamed the territory New Schwabenland, New Swabia. But the pilots reported seeing things that shouldn't be there. As they flew inland, away from the coast, they claimed to see thermal vents. Areas where the ice had melted away, revealing bare earth. They photographed lakes. Not frozen lakes, but liquid lakes steaming in the polar air. They described a landscape of oases, valleys, protected by the high walls of the mountains, where the temperature was warm enough for vegetation. Warm caves, underground networks. Rumours began to circulate in the occult circles of the SS, the Thule Society. They believed that Antarctica was not just a continent. They believed it was the entrance to something. The Hollow Earth. The AGARTHA. The idea sounds mad to us now, but you must understand the mindset of the time. These were men who believed in blood myths, in ancient Aryan ancestors who possessed God-like powers. They were scouring the world, Tibet, the Amazon, the Arctic, looking for artifacts of this lost power. They believed that the first civilization was their ancestors, and they believed that the survivors had gone underground into the warm caverns beneath the ice. Did they find a base? Did they find an entrance? We have no documents that say, yes, But we have the behavior of the world's militaries immediately after the war, and behavior never lies. Germany fell in 1945. The war ended. The world was exhausted. And yet, in 1946, while the rest of the military was demobilizing and going home to their families, the United States Navy launched the largest scientific expedition in history. Destination Antarctica, codename Operation Highjump. This was not a few scientists with beakers and thermometers. This was an invasion force. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the most famous polar explorer of his age, was given command of Task Force 68. Look at the inventory. 700 men, 13 ships, an aircraft carrier, the USS Philippines submarines, destroyers, tankers, helicopters, flying boats, 4,700 soldiers for a scientific mission to look at penguins, to measure the ice. You do not bring an aircraft carrier to study the weather. You bring an aircraft carrier to project power. You bring an aircraft carrier to fight a war. But who were they fighting? There was no one there. The Germans were defeated. The continent was empty. Unless it wasn't. Operation Highjump was scheduled to last for 6 to 8 months. They planned to encircle the continent, map it, and build a permanent base called Little America IV. They arrived with aggressive speed. They began flying missions immediately. And then something strange happened. After only 6 weeks, the mission was abruptly cancelled. The fleet turned around. They withdrew. They didn't just leave, they fled. Why? Why would the most powerful navy on Earth, equipped with the latest technology, turn tail and run from an empty block of ice after less than 2 months? The official report says, bad weather. It says, early winter conditions. But the whispers from the sailors told a different story. They spoke of casualties. They spoke of aircraft that vanished. They spoke of craft that rose out of the water. Not airplanes, not balloons, but discs, flat, saucer-shaped objects that could fly from the water to the sky in seconds. Objects that moved with a speed that made the American fighters look like they were standing still. One report, often dismissed as myth, but persistent in the diaries of the men, claims that a destroyer, the USS Murdoch, was damaged. That planes were swatted out of the sky by invisible beams. Admiral Byrd himself gave an interview to a journalist, Lee Van Atter, on the deck of the command ship Mount Olympus while they were retreating. The interview was published in the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio on March 5, 1947. I want you to listen to Byrd's words carefully. He was not a man given to fantasy. He was a pragmatic, decorated admiral. He said, "It is necessary for the USA to take defensive actions against enemy air fighters which come from the polar regions." He continued, "The United States could be attacked by flyers which are able to fly from one pole to the other with incredible speed. Enemy air fighters from the polar regions. In 1947, the only enemy was the Soviet Union, and they barely had a functional air force, let alone something that could fly pole to pole with incredible speed." Who was Byrd talking about? Was he talking about the remnants of the Nazi Neuschwabenland base hidden in the warm caves? Had the Germans developed advanced technology in their secret sanctuary? Or was he talking about something else? Something that had been there long before the Germans, something that the Germans had merely found, something that woke up when the American fleet arrived. There is a diary alleged to belong to Admiral Byrd. A secret diary. Historians debate its authenticity. Skeptics say it is a forgery. Believers say it is the truth that was too dangerous to print. In this diary, Byrd describes flying over the South Pole and entering a land beyond the center. He describes seeing green valleys, not fossilized ones, but living ones. He describes seeing a great crystal city. He describes landing his plane and being met by tall, blonde-haired beings who spoke with accents that sounded German, but also ancient. They told him that they were the guardians of the earth, that they had watched humanity detonate the atomic bombs in Japan, and they were concerned that we were children playing with fire. Is it a fabrication, a hallucination brought on by the white darkness? Perhaps, but combine it with the Piri Reis map, combine it with the fossilized leaves, combine it with the satellite anomalies. The pattern remains the same. A hidden land, a hidden people, a hidden history. Operation Highjump ended in retreat, but the government didn't stop looking. They just stopped looking publicly. They changed tactics. They stopped sending aircraft carriers and started sending treaties. In 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was signed. 12 nations, including the US and the Soviet Union, who were bitter enemies in the Cold War, agreed to instantly demilitarize the continent. Think about how rare that is. At the height of the nuclear arms race, when every inch of land was being fought over, the two superpowers looked at Antarctica and said, "No one touches this." They declared it a scientific preserve. They banned military testing. They banned nuclear detonations. They banned mining. Why? Was it really to protect the penguins? Was it really to preserve the ice for climate science? Or was it a quarantine? Did they realize after Highjump that they could not conquer what was down there, that the owners of Antarctica were already home? So they built a fence around it. They created a bureaucratic wall to keep us out, to keep us from stumbling upon the entrance, to keep us from asking questions about the no-fly zones over the pole, to keep us from finding the structures that break the horizon of the ice. Let us turn our gaze now to those structures, because no matter how many treaties you sign, you cannot hide a mountain that shouldn't be there. You cannot hide geometry. Let us travel now to the southern part of the Ellsworth Mountains. Here, amidst a chaotic sea of jagged peaks and twisted ridges, there stands a shape that does not belong. It is not a chaotic shape. It is not random. It is perfect. Rising out of the snow is a four-sided structure. Its faces are smooth. Its edges are razor sharp. It tapers to a singular point that pierces the sky. It looks, for all the world, like the Great Pyramid of Giza. But it is not in the sands of Egypt. It is in the frozen heart of the Antarctic. This mountain, if it is a mountain, was revealed to the world via satellite imagery. When the photos first appeared online, they caused a storm. Skeptics were quick to dismiss it. They called it a nunatak. A nunatak is a geological term. It refers to a mountain peak that pokes through the top of a glacier like an island in a river of ice. Geologists argue that wind and freeze, thaw cycles can, over millions of years, carve rock into sharp, angular shapes. They say that nature loves crystals and crystals are geometric. Therefore, nature can create a pyramid. And perhaps they are right. Nature is a master sculptor, but look closer. Nature typically carves with chaos. Erosion is uneven. The wind blows from one direction more than another. The sun melts one side faster than the other. Yet, this structure possesses a symmetry that is unsettling. Its four sides appear to align with the cardinal points: north, south, east, west. This is the signature of the pyramid builders. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 3/60ths of a degree. In Mexico, the pyramid of the sun faces the precise point of the sunset on the day of the zenith passage. In China, the massive earthen pyramids of Xi'an align with the stars. The ancients did not build randomly. They built with the precision of astronomers. If the Antarctic structure is aligned, if it faces the cardinal directions, then the random erosion theory begins to crack. Wind does not know where north is. Erosion does not consult a compass. So we are left with a staggering possibility. Could it be that the pyramids we see in Egypt, in Mexico, in Cambodia, and in Peru are not isolated incidents? Could it be that they are part of a global network, a design language that spanned the entire planet? And could it be that the oldest, the first, the master pyramid is not in the desert, but in the ice? Think about the implications of a pyramid in Antarctica. If it was built when the continent was green. It was built before the ice swallowed the land. This would make it older than Egypt, older than Sumeria, older than the last ice age. It would mean that the Pyramid Age was not a Bronze Age development, but a legacy, a memory of something far older. Why did the ancients build pyramids? We are told they are tombs, giant headstones for dead kings. But in the Great Pyramid of Giza, no mummy was ever found, no inscription, no body. It is a machine of stone. Engineers have pointed out that the design of the Great Pyramid resembles a power plant. It uses granite crystal bearing rock to conduct vibration. It uses water channels. It uses acoustic chambers. Some theorists believe that pyramids were not tombs, but geomechanical devices, that they were built to stabilize the Earth's crust or to tap into the telluric currents, the natural electrical grid of the planet. If this is true, if pyramids are functional, then finding one at the South Pole makes perfect sense. The poles are the axis of the Earth. They are the points where the planet's magnetic field enters and exits. They are the anchor points of our rotation. If you were an advanced civilization and you wanted to interact with the Earth's energy field, the pole is exactly where you would put your primary instrument. Perhaps the structure in the Ellsworth Mountains is not just a building. Perhaps it is an antenna that has been silent for 12,000 years. There is a theory known as the world grid. It suggests that all the major sacred sites of the ancient world are connected, that if you draw lines between Giza, Easter Island, Machu Picchu, and Mohenjo-Daro, you form a geometric pattern, a lattice that covers the globe. Antarctica sits at the hub of this lattice. It is the keystone. If the other pyramids are the nodes of the network, Antarctica is the server room. Is this why the governments of the world are so protective of it? Is this why, when you go to Google Earth and try to zoom in on certain parts of the Ellsworth Mountains, the resolution drops, or the image is obscured by a glitch? We live in an age of information. We have satellites that can read a license plate from space. And yet we are told that we cannot see clear images of a mountain range in Antarctica because of data errors. It invites the question, what are they blurring out? Are they hiding the capstone? Are they hiding the entrance? Or are they hiding the excavation? Because if that structure is artificial, then it is the greatest archaeological discovery in the history of the species. It proves that we are not the first masters of this planet. It proves that before us there were others who could move mountains, others who understood the geometry of the Earth better than we do. And it begs the question, what happened to them? Did the machine fail? Did the flash freeze catch them off guard? Imagine the last priests of the southern pyramid. The sky turning dark. The temperature plummeting 50 degrees in an hour. The tropical rain turning to needle, sharp ice. Did they run to the pyramid for safety? Did they try to activate it? Or did they realize that their time was up? The silence of the pyramid is the silence of a stopped clock. It marks the exact moment when the first civilization died. But the pyramid is a visible anomaly. It stands in the light. There are other anomalies that are harder to find. Anomalies that are deep, deep down. We must leave the mountains now. We must descend from the peaks and travel to the flattest, most desolate part of the interior, to a place called Vostok. Here, the Russians established a research station in the coldest spot on Earth. They drilled down, mile after mile, looking for the bedrock. But they didn't hit rock. They hit water. They discovered that beneath the ice, cut off from the sun and the atmosphere for 15 million years, lies a lake the size of Lake Ontario, liquid, warm, and magnetic. Something down there is generating a magnetic signature so strong that it distorts the instruments of aircraft flying overhead. Is it a natural deposit of iron, or is it a city? Lake Vostok is one of the final frontiers of our planet. It is a sub-glacial lake. The ice above it acts as a pressurized lid. The weight of the glacier is so immense that it keeps the water liquid, even though it is below freezing. Geothermal heat from the Earth's core warms it from below. It is an alien world right here on Earth. When scientists realized it was there, the excitement was palpable. They realized that this lake was a biological time capsule. Whatever life forms were trapped in there had been evolving in isolation for millions of years. But then the excitement turned to caution. In the early 2000s, a team of researchers flying over the lake detected a massive magnetic anomaly on the shoreline. A magnetic anomaly is simply a concentration of magnetic material. Usually it means a deposit of iron ore or a volcano. But this anomaly was distinct. It was concentrated. It was geometric. It measured 65 by 65 miles, a massive square. Nature creates curves. Nature creates jagged lines. Nature rarely creates perfect squares of magnetic intensity. The data was compelling enough that the US National Security Agency, NSA, allegedly took an interest. Rumors, and we must treat them as such, though they persist in the intelligence community, suggest that the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, was contracted to analyze the data. Why would the JPL, the people who build rovers for Mars, look at a lake in Antarctica? Because the anomaly looked artificial. It looked like a structure. A massive, metallic structure buried on the edge of the lake. The theory goes like this. If you were an advanced civilization facing a cataclysm, a pole shift, a meteor, a solar flare, where would you hide? You wouldn't hide on the surface. The surface is vulnerable. You would go underground or underwater. You would build a biosphere, a self-contained habitat powered by geothermal energy, protected by the thermal mass of the water and the shielding of the rock. Lake Vostok would be the perfect location. It has fresh water. It has heat from below, and when the ice sheet formed, it provided a perfect, impenetrable shield against the chaos on the surface. Is it possible that the anomaly is not a ruin, but a habitat In 2012, the Russian team finally drilled through the ice and reached the surface of the water. The world waited. What would they find? They found bacteria. Strange, ancient bacteria that didn't match known genetic profiles. But then the news went silent. There were reports, wild, unconfirmed reports from Russian media of a disturber. They claimed that the drills had encountered resistance. Not rock, but something else. They claimed that the water samples contained organic compounds that suggested complex life. And then the narrative shifted. The focus moved away from Vostok. The world was told it's just a lake, just bacteria. But the magnetic anomaly remains. It is still there, pulsating on the instruments. A ghost in the machine. We must ask ourselves, why are we not looking harder? If there is even a 1% chance that a structure exists under the ice, why isn't every nation on Earth drilling there? Why is the area restricted? Perhaps the answer lies in the danger. Not the danger of the cold, but the danger of the truth. If we found a city under the ice, if we found machines, if we found bodies, it would break our version of history. It would mean that we are not the apex of evolution. We are the survivors. We are the ones living in the ruins of a greater world. It is a humbling thought. It is a frightening thought. And maybe that is why we prefer the silence. We prefer to think of Antarctica as a blank slate. Because a blank slate is safe. A blank slate has no ghosts. But the ghosts are there. They are in the magnetic waves. They are in the gravity wells. And they are in the sky. Because in the age of satellites, the ice cannot hide everything. In 2016, a new set of images emerged. Not from the ground, but from space. They showed something in the region of the Shackleton Range. It appeared to be an opening. A massive, hexagonal opening in the side of a mountain, about 300 feet across, too perfect to be a cave, too large to be a vent. It looked like a hangar door, and leading up to it were tracks. We are entering the era of Google Earth archaeology. Ordinary people, sitting in their bedrooms, are scanning the ice. They are finding things that the professionals missed or ignored. They are finding the face of Antarctica, a formation that looks shockingly like a human face, screaming silently into the sky. They are finding the Antarctic staircase, a series of giant steps leading up a mountain, seemingly cut for giants. Are these tricks of light and shadow? Pareidolia, the mind seeing patterns where none exist. Likely, many of them are. But do we dismiss them all? If you find 100 rocks and 99 are just rocks, but one is a diamond, you are still rich. We only need one anomaly to be real. Just one. If one pyramid is real, if one map is accurate, if one magnetic signal is artificial, then the history of the world changes instantly. The wind is picking up again. We are leaving the surface of the lake. We are rising back through the 2 miles of ice, back to the blinding white of the plateau. We have looked at the maps. We have looked at the mountains. We have looked at the lakes. But there is one more place we must look. A place that is even more forbidden. The archives of the Vatican and the secret vaults of the Smithsonian, because there are rumors that the evidence has already been found, that it wasn't left in the ice. It was taken. They say that the black budget projects didn't come home empty, handed from Operation Highjump. They say they brought back crates containing artifacts, technology, and skulls. Skulls that are human, but not quite, elongated, large, distorted. The Paracas, skulls of Peru have long baffled geneticists. They have DNA that does not match the local tribes. They have cranial volume larger than a modern human. Could the refugees of the Antarctic cataclysm have fled to Peru? Could the first civilization be the ancestors of the Paracas people? We are going to follow the trail of the refugees. We are going to trace the survivors of the flash freeze. But first, we must understand the event itself. What could turn a rainforest into a freezer in a single night? What weapon does nature possess that is powerful enough to stop a continent dead in its tracks? It wasn't a war. It wasn't a plague. It was the sky falling. We live in an age where there are no more secrets on the surface of the earth, or so we are told. For thousands of years, geography was the domain of explorers, brave men in wooden ships, risking their lives to draw a line on a map. But today, geography belongs to the machines. Orbiting hundreds of miles above our heads is a network of silent sentinels, satellites. They circle the globe every 90 minutes, photographing every square inch of the planet. They see the Amazon burning. They see the lights of Tokyo. They see the tank movements in conflict zones, and they see the white continent. Antarctica is the most photographed place on Earth relative to its population. NASA, the European Space Agency, the Russians, the Chinese, everyone is watching the ice. Why? Ostensibly, it is to monitor climate change, to watch the ice shelves carve into the ocean, to measure the rise of the sea. But sometimes, the cameras capture things that are not ice. In the last decade, a new kind of archaeology has emerged. It is called armchair archaeology. It is performed not with shovels and brushes, but with a mouse and a keyboard. Millions of people around the world, using Google Earth, are scoring the high-resolution images of Antarctica, and they are finding anomalies that the official maps leave out. In 2018, a user zooming in on the remote region of South Georgia Island spotted something that looked like a crash site. A long, chaotic trail in the snow, leading from a mountain peak down to a resting place on the glacier. At the end of the trail was a rigid object. It didn't look like a rock. It looked like a craft. The mainstream explanation came quickly. It is a rock slide, a block of ice that fell and slid. But then, other coordinates began to circulate on the forums of the curious. Coordinates like I666 3614S99 Redras and 434 Edras. If you type these into your map, you will see something that defies the natural order. It appears to be a massive, black opening in the side of a mountain, a dark void against the blinding white. But it is not jagged like a cave. It has a rim. It has symmetry, and most strangely, it appears to have a dome. Is it a natural formation, a trick of shadow and light, or is it an entrance? Remember the Hollow Earth obsession of the 1930s. Remember the pilots of the Schwabenland claiming they saw thermal vents. The satellite images seem to confirm that something is venting heat from below the surface. In 2017, NASA itself admitted that there is a mantle plume, a massive upwelling of hot rock from the Earth's core, pushing up against the underside of the Marie Birdland ice sheet. The ice there is melting from the bottom up. It creates caverns, dams, rivers. A perfect, warm environment hidden beneath the shield of the glacier. If you were a survivor of a cataclysm, if you were the last of a great civilization, and you knew the sky was falling, wouldn't you go there? Wouldn't you retreat into the warmth of the mantle plume? The satellites are stripping away the camouflage. The ice is melting, and as it melts, the ghost architecture is emerging. There are images of what appear to be roads, straight, parallel lines running for miles under the melting snow. There are images of what look like foundations, square perimeters of stone, revealed as the glaciers recede. And every time one of these images goes viral, something strange happens. The resolution changes. The next time the map updates, that specific grid square becomes blurry, or it is covered by a patch of cloud, or it is simply blacked out. Censorship, or just a glitch in the data processing. Ask yourself, why does a glitch only happen over the anomalies? Why do we have crystal clear 4K images of miles of empty snow, but the moment a structure appears, the camera fails? It suggests that there is a filter, a human hand intervening between the satellite and your screen. Someone is curating the view. Someone wants us to see the ice, but not what lies beneath it. This brings us to the most unsettling realization of the modern era. The Antarctic Treaty says the continent belongs to no one. It is a land of peace, a land of science. But if it is just a land of science, why is it so militarized? Why are there no-fly zones over the pole? Commercial pilots flying from South America to Australia often take polar routes to save fuel, but they never fly directly over the center. They skirt the edges. They are told it is for safety, magnetic interference, lack of emergency landing strips. But there are whispers among veteran pilots of interceptions, of being warned off by radios that shouldn't exist, of seeing lights rising from the ice to meet them. The eye in the sky is watching, but it blinks when we get too close. If the satellites are the silent witnesses, then we must look at the behavior of the powerful. In the world of intelligence, you don't look at what people say. You look at where they off go. And in the year 2016, a strange pilgrimage began. It was a year of political chaos. The world was distracted by elections, by Brexit, by turmoil. And quietly, unnoticed by the masses, the most powerful people on Earth began flying to Antarctica. On November 11th, 2016, Election Day in the United States, Secretary of State John Kerry left the country. He didn't go to a swing state. He didn't go to a war room. He flew to McMurdo Station, Antarctica. Why? Why would the top diplomat of the United States, the man responsible for global relations, leave his country on the most important day of the political calendar to visit a frozen wasteland? The official reason? To highlight the dangers of climate change. It is a noble cause. But on election day, was there something he needed to see? Something that couldn't wait. Something that was revealed as the ice melted. And he wasn't the only one. Earlier that year, in February 2016, a man who rarely leaves Russia made the journey. Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, the spiritual advisor to Vladimir Putin. He is a man of immense power and tradition. He does not go on adventure holidays. Yet, he flew thousands of miles to King George Island. He claimed he went to pray at a tiny wooden church, the Church of the Holy Trinity, that the Russians had built on the ice. Photos show him walking among the penguins in his long, flowing robes. He looks like a wizard from a fantasy novel, standing at the edge of the world. He performed a liturgy for the silence. But rumors swirled in Moscow. Intelligence leaks suggested that he hadn't gone to bless a church. He had gone to bless an ark, the Ark of Gabriel. Now we are entering the realm of deep speculation. But the story, as told in the shadowy corners of the internet, goes like this. A mysterious device, an ancient weapon or repository of knowledge, was discovered in Mecca during construction work. It was terrifyingly powerful. It killed the men who tried to move it. The rumor claims that the Russians were asked to transport it, to take it to the only place on Earth where its energy could be contained, Antarctica. Is it true? Likely not. It sounds like the plot of an Indiana Jones movie. But the some movement of the Patriarch is a fact. This movement of John Kerry is a fact, and they were followed by others. Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, an American hero, a man of science and engineering. He flew to Antarctica in late 2016, shortly after Kerry. He was 86 years old. Why would an 86-year-old man risk his health to go to the South Pole? He arrived. He saw something. And then he had a medical emergency. His lungs began to fill with fluid. He had to be evacuated on an emergency flight to New Zealand. While he was recovering in the hospital, a tweet appeared on his official Twitter account. It was a picture of a pyramid-shaped mountain in Antarctica, and the caption readeth, "We are all in danger. It is evil itself." The tweet was deleted almost immediately. His representatives claimed he was hacked. They claimed it was a hoax. But for those who saw it, it sent a chill down the spine. It is evil itself. What could a man who has walked on the moon see that would make him call a mountain evil? Did he see the machinery? Did he see the frozen bodies? Did he see the truth of our origins? Or did he simply see the scale of the threat? If the first civilization was destroyed by a cataclysm, and if that cataclysm is cyclical, perhaps he saw the clock counting down. Perhaps the reason the elites are going to Antarctica is not to marvel at the past. It is to prepare for the future. If the world ends in fire, the only safe place is the ice. Are they building bunkers? Are they reactivating the ancient shelters of the Mantle Plim? Is the secret space program actually a secret ice program? We see the massive cargo planes landing on the ice runways, C-17 Globemasters, Galaxy transports. They swallow tons of concrete, tons of steel, massive servers. Where is it all going? There are no skyscrapers on the surface. There are only small, prefabricated research stations on stilts. So where is the concrete going? It is going down, into the tunnels, into the warm caves, into the void left by the first civilization. We are squatting in their ruins. We are retrofitting their bunkers. Because we know what is coming. There is a profound sadness in this secrecy. Antarctica should be the heritage of all mankind. If there is a library of history down there, it belongs to us all. But instead it is hoarded. It is classified. Top secret. We are like children who have found a parent's diary, but are too afraid to open it. But the physical evidence cannot be classified. Bones do not sign non-disclosure agreements. DNA does not lie. And the evidence of who these first people were has been leaking out, not from Antarctica itself, but from the places they fled to. We need to look at the refugees. When the ice came, they didn't all die. Some of them ran. They ran north, to the tip of South America, to the islands of the Pacific, and they carried their genetics with them, strange genetics. Skulls that are too long, blood types that don't match, red hair in populations that should have black hair. We are going to look at the Paracas skulls. We are going to ask why the museums of the world hid these bones away in the basements. And we are going to ask the most dangerous question of all. Were the rulers of the first civilization entirely human? If a continent dies, where do its people go? Imagine the moment the cold began, the skies darkening, the temperatures dropping, the ice closing in like a slow, white army. You would run. You would gather your families, your maps, your most precious artifacts, and you would flee toward the warmth. If you were in Antarctica, the nearest landmass is South America, specifically the jagged coast of Tierra del Fuego and the deserts of Peru. It is a straight shot north across the Drake Passage. If the first civilization escaped the freeze, this is where they would land. And this is where we should find their bones. For decades, archaeologists have been digging in the dry sands of the Paracas Peninsula in Peru. It is a desolate place, a desert that meets the sea. In 1928, a Peruvian archaeologist named Julio Tello made a discovery that should have rewritten the history books. He found a massive graveyard, a necropolis. Buried under the sand were hundreds of intricate woven baskets. And inside the baskets were mummies. They were wrapped in textiles of stunning complexity, woven with thread counts that rival modern luxury fabrics. But when Tello unwrapped the mummies, he found something that made him recoil. The heads were wrong. The skulls were massive, elongated, stretching back and up, away from the forehead in a shape that looked alien. He found over 300 of them. Now, historians will immediately tell you, this is cranial deformation, head binding. And it is true. Many ancient cultures, the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Huns, practiced head binding. They would strap boards to a baby's head to force it to grow into a certain shape. It was a status symbol, a way to imitate the gods. But there is a problem with the Paracas skulls, a mathematical problem. When you bind a head, you change its shape. You do not change its volume. Think of a balloon filled with water. You can squeeze it. You can stretch it. You can flatten it. But the amount of water inside, the volume stays the same. You cannot create more brain just by squeezing the skull. But the Paracas skulls are different. Tello found that many of these skulls have a cranial capacity that is up to 25% larger than a modern human. They are also heavier, much heavier. Their bone density is 60% greater than yours or mine. You cannot achieve that with boards and straps. You cannot bind a head to make it grow more bone. You cannot bind a head to make the brain grow bigger. This is not modification. This is genetics. These people were born this way. They walked the earth with heads that were naturally towering, with brains that were significantly larger than the average Homo sapiens. Who were they? The local legends say they were the children of the sea, the royal lineage. They say they came from the south. Look at the map. Paracas is perfectly positioned to receive refugees coming up the Humboldt Current from Antarctica. And they didn't just look different. They were different. A normal human skull has 2 parietal plates, the 2 bones that make up the roof of your head, joined by a suture line down the middle. Some of the Paracas skulls have only 1 single parietal plate, no suture. This is a biological anomaly that simply shouldn't exist in the human fossil record. It suggests a divergence, a different branch of the family tree. Were they a separate species, a subspecies, or were they the Watchers? The Nephilim, mentioned in ancient texts, the giant kings who ruled over the first civilization. If Antarctica was their home, a place of darkness for half the year, where the stars were the only light, perhaps their eyes and brains evolved differently. Perhaps they needed larger cranial capacity to process the sensory data of a low light environment. And when their home froze, they brought their genetics to Peru. But they brought something else too, something that is even more impossible than the shape of their heads. They brought red hair. Native Americans, the indigenous people of Peru and South America, have black hair. Thick, straight, black hair. It is a genetic trait that is almost universal in that part of the world before the arrival of the Europeans. But the Paracas mummies have red hair, auburn, strawberry blonde, burning red, and it is wavy. It is much finer than Native American hair. Skeptics argue that hair changes colour over centuries in a tomb. Oxidation can turn black hair reddish, but researchers have analysed the hair shafts. The red pigment is not on the surface. It is in the medulla, the core of the hair. It is natural. So we have a population of people living in Peru 3,000 years ago who were giant, had elongated skulls, and had red hair. This sounds like a Celtic description. Or Norse? How did red-haired giants end up on the coast of Peru thousands of years before the Vikings? Unless they didn't come from Europe. Unless they came from the lost continent in the south. In 2014, a researcher named Brian Forster decided to test the DNA. He took samples from the skulls, bone powder, teeth, hair. He sent them to laboratories in the US and Canada. He didn't tell the labs where the samples came from to avoid bias. The results came back, and they were baffling. The mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down from the mother, showed mutations that were unknown. They didn't match the local tribes. They didn't match the primates, but the segments that could be identified pointed to a shocking origin. They showed markers associated with the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, the Caucasus Mountains, the area between Europe and Asia. How does a genetic line from the Caucasus Mountains end up ruling a kingdom in Peru 3,000 years ago? History says it's impossible. There were no boats that could make that journey. But if we accept the Antarctic hypothesis, the pieces fit. If the first civilization was a global seafaring culture, the same one that mapped the world for Piri Reis, then their genetics would be widespread. They would be the root stock. When the cataclysm hit Antarctica, one group might have fled north to South America, becoming the Paracas culture. Another group might have fled to the high mountains of the Caucasus, preserving the red hair and height. They are cousins. Fragments of a shattered empire. The Paracas people were the last nobility of the ice. They tried to keep their bloodline pure. That's why they lived in isolation on the peninsula. That's why they were buried in such luxury. But eventually, they were overwhelmed. The local tribes rose up. Archaeological evidence at Paracas shows a violent end. Many of the skulls have fractures. They were killed, exterminated. The gods bled just like men, but their legacy remained in the stories. The Incas talked about the Viracocha, the white, bearded gods who came from the seas, or the Lac in times of chaos. They brought agriculture. They brought stonemasonry. They brought the laws of civilization. And then they vanished. Viracocha means foam of the sea. Did they come from the foam of the melting glaciers? Let us move further south, closer to the source, to Patagonia, the very tip of Argentina, facing the Antarctic Channel, when Ferdinand Magellan, the first man to circumnavigate the globe, arrived here in 1520. He saw something that terrified his crew. He wrote in his ship's log that they encountered a race of giants. He described men who stood nearly 10 feet tall. He said that when his men stood next to them, The sailors' heads barely reached the giants' waists. He called the land Patagonia, which means land of the big feet, a Patagonist. Magellan wasn't the only one. Francis Drake, the English pirate and explorer, landed there 60 years later. His chaplain, Francis Fletcher, wrote Men of Large Stature. The name Pentagons, 5 cubits, viz. 7 foot and half. S. Dutch explorers confirmed it. Sailors for centuries reported seeing the giants of Patagonia. Were these just tall tales? Sailor stories to impress the girls back home? Perhaps. But we have the Paracas skulls. We have the bone density. We have the robust skeletons found in burial mounds across the Americas. It seems that the closer you get to Antarctica, the larger the people become. Is this a biological adaptation? There is a rule in biology called Bergmann's rule. It states that populations and species of larger size are found in colder environments. Bears are bigger in the north, polar bears, than in the tropics, sun bears. Tigers are bigger in Siberia than in Sumatra. Large bodies retain heat better. If a human civilization evolved in Antarctica, in the deep cold of the Ice Age, or the cool temperate forests of the Eocene, they would naturally select for size. They would be giants. And when their continent froze, they moved to Patagonia. The Tehuelche people, who lived in Patagonia until the 19th century, were historically known for their immense height. They were some of the tallest people on Earth. Are they the dilute descendants of the first civilization? The pieces are scattered, but they all point in the same direction. South. The maps point south. The elongated skulls point south. The red hair points south. The legends of the Viracocha point south. We are looking at the footprints of a ghost. But why did they leave? Why abandon the Crystal City? Why abandon the pyramids and the warm valleys? Civilizations don't just pack up and leave their homeland unless they have no choice. Unless the choice is leave or die. We need to understand the weapon that killed the first civilization. It wasn't a slow decline. It wasn't a drought. It was sudden. We spoke earlier of the flash freeze, of mountains that looked like they were snapped into ice instantly. How does that happen? How do you take a temperate rainforest and turn it into a freezer in a matter of hours? Physics tells us there is only one way. The Earth must slip. The crustal displacement theory. Imagine the skin of an orange. The skin is loose. If you twist it, the skin moves, but the fruit inside stays still. The Earth has a skin, the crust. It floats on a liquid mantle. If the balance of the Earth is disturbed by the buildup of ice or an asteroid impact, the skin can slip. In a single day, a continent sitting at the temperate latitude, like Antarctica in the Oceanid, could slide thousands of miles south to the pole. The land moves. The climate changes instantly. The winds that were warm become freezing gales. The rain turns to snow. The ocean rushes in to cover the land. This is the nightmare scenario, and the evidence for it is hidden in the mouths of the mammoths. In Siberia, the mirror image of Antarctica, we find woolly mammoths frozen in blocks of ice, but they aren't just frozen. They are flash frozen. Their meat is still fresh enough to eat. Their blood is still liquid, and in their stomachs and in their mouths are buttercups. Fresh spring flowers. They were grazing in a warm meadow, and then, mid-bite, they were frozen solid. The temperature required to do that, to freeze a massive animal so fast that the food in its stomach doesn't rot, is absolute. It is minus 150 degrees. It is the temperature of space coming down to Earth. If it happened in Siberia, It happened in Antarctica. The first civilization didn't have years to pack. They had minutes. They ran for the ships. They ran for the caves. And those who didn't make it are still there, standing in the streets of the city, sitting in their homes, perfectly preserved statues of flesh and bone, waiting in the dark. This is what the black budget teams are looking for. They aren't just looking for tech. They are looking for the sleepers. They are looking for the DNA of the gods, and perhaps they have found it. Is that why the human genome has ghost DNA? Segments of code that don't match Neanderthals or Denisovans. Maybe we are all a little bit Antarctic. Maybe the refugees didn't just die out in Peru. Maybe they interbred. Maybe they spread. Maybe the memory of the lost paradise that exists in every culture, Eden, Atlantis, Avalon, is a genetic memory. A memory of the green continent before the fall. We have looked at the people. Now we must look at the catastrophe itself, the event that broke the world. We call it the Younger Dryas. The day the sky fell. Every story has an ending. For the first civilization, the ending did not come with a whimper. It came with a roar. To understand the death of Antarctica, we must look at a specific moment in time, a scar in the geological record that marks the difference between before and after. The date is approximately 12,800 years ago. Geologists call this period the Younger Dryas. Before this moment, the Earth was warming up. The Ice Age was ending. The glaciers were retreating. Life was expanding. And then, in a heartbeat, the planet was plunged back into a deep freeze. A freeze so violent and so sudden that it wiped out 70% of the megafauna in North America. The woolly mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, the giant sloths, gone, and along with them, the sophisticated human culture known as the Slovis people vanished from the archaeological record. For decades, scientists argued about what caused this. They blamed climate cycles. They blamed overhunting. But in recent years, a new smoking gun has been found. It is a thin layer of black ash found in the soil across 4 continents. It is called the black mat. Inside this layer, scientists have found something that does not belong on Earth. Nanodiamonds, microscopic diamonds that are only formed under extreme pressure and heat. The kind of heat you get when a cosmic object strikes the planet. And they found iridium, a rare element common in asteroids. The evidence suggests that 12,800 years ago, the Earth didn't just get cold. It got hit. Imagine the scene. A disintegrated cometa shotgun blast of cosmic debris slamming into the ice sheet of North America. The energy release would have been equal to thousands of nuclear bombs going off at once. The impact didn't just burn the forests. It vaporized the ice. Millions of tons of steam and water were blasted into the atmosphere. This water vapor blocked out the sun. It disrupted the ocean currents. The Gulf Stream, which keeps the world warm, shut down. The planet went dark, and then it went cold. But for Antarctica, the mechanism might have been even more terrifying. It wasn't just the cold, it was the movement. We return to the crustal displacement theory. Albert Einstein, in a foreword to Charles Hapgood's book, called the idea electrifying. The theory proposes that the shell of the Earth can slide over the core. If a massive impact destabilized the rotation of the planet, if the weight of the ice caps became unbalanced, the crust could slip. Imagine Antarctica sitting in a temperate zone, green, habitable, and then the comet hits. The Earth shudders. The crust breaks loose. In a matter of days, or perhaps hours, The continent of Antarctica slides southward. It moves from the warm latitudes into the polar circle. The sun, which was high in the sky, drops to the horizon. The wind changes. The warm breeze of the ocean is replaced by the polar vortex. This is the flash freeze. It is the only way to explain the preservation we see. When you freeze a piece of meat slowly in your freezer, ice crystals form inside the cells. They expand. They burst the cell walls. When you thaw the meat, it turns to mush. But if you freeze meat instantly using liquid nitrogen, the cells stay intact. The biology is preserved perfectly. The mammoths in Siberia were not mush. They were intact. Their eyes were still liquid. Their internal organs were perfect. They were flash frozen. This means the temperature dropped to minus 150 degrees Fahrenheit in less time than it takes to eat a meal. Now, apply this to the first civilization. Imagine the city in the Gamburtse Valley. It is a Tuesday, or whatever they called Tuesday. People are walking in the streets. The astronomers are in the pyramids. The ships are in the harbour. They see the flash in the sky. They feel the ground shake. But they don't panic yet. Earthquakes happen. But then the wind hits. A wall of air, colder than anything they have ever known, slams into the valley. It is not a storm. It is an atmospheric vacuum. The heat is sucked out of the world instantly. The rivers freeze mid-flow. The waves in the harbour freeze into sculptures of ice. The people running for shelter freeze before they can close the doors. It is Pompeii, but without the fire. It is a frozen Pompeii. There is no decay. There is no rot. Just silence. The snow begins to fall. It falls on the roofs of the temples. It falls on the ships. It falls on the bodies. It covers everything in a white blanket, and because it never melts, because the continent has moved to the pole where the sun is weak, the blanket grows thicker. Year after year, century after century, the city disappears. The mountains disappear. The civilization becomes a rumor, then a legend, then a myth, until finally we forget they ever existed. We look at the white wasteland and say, no one could ever live here. We are walking on their graves. But the ice is not just a tomb. It is a vault. By sealing the city, the ice saved it. If the civilization had died by war, the cities would be burned. If it had died by plague, the buildings would crumble. But because it died by ice, everything is still there. The books in the libraries, the tools on the workbenches, the technology in the pyramids. It is all waiting for the thaw, or for the digging. This brings us back to the black budget world. If the governments know about the crustal displacement, if they know about the flash freeze, then they know what is waiting down there. They know that the greatest treasure in the universe is not gold. It is knowledge. Recovering the technology of the first civilization would be the ultimate prize. Energy systems that don't need oil. Propulsion systems that defy gravity. Medical technology that can heal any wound. Whoever controls the ice controls the future. Is this why the Nazis went? Is this why the Americans went? Is this why the Russians are drilling? They are looting the Atlantis of the South. But there is a danger in disturbing the dead. Bacteria, viruses, ancient pathogens that have been asleep in the ice for 12,000 years. Our immune systems have forgotten them. In 2016, there were reports of a sudden evacuation at the American base. Medical emergencies. Did they open a door they shouldn't have? Did the curse of the pharaohs strike not in the desert, but in the snow? The cataclysm killed the first civilization. But the ice kept their secrets alive. And now, as the planet warms again, as the cycle turns, the ice is retreating. We are about to meet our ancestors, and we might not like what they have to tell us. The thaw is coming, and with it the final revelation. We have looked at the past. We have looked at the tragedy. Now, we must look at the survivors, the ones who didn't freeze, the ones who carried the torch to the rest of the world. We are going to follow the civilizing gods, the teachers who showed up in Sumeria, in Egypt, in India. Right after the flood, they brought the same knowledge, the same architecture, the same mathematics. They were the missionaries of Antarctica, attempting to reboot the world. When the ice closed its fist around the southern continent, silence fell. But it was not the end of the story. It was merely the end of the chapter. Imagine the survivors. They are the lucky ones, the ones who made it to the ships before the harbours froze, the ones who were already at sea when the sky turned black. They look back at their home. They see the wall of white consuming the mountains. They see the lights of the crystal city flickering out, one by one, until only the dark remains. They are refugees now. The kings, the astronomers, the masons, the architects. They are carrying the sum total of human knowledge in their minds, and they are drifting into a world that has been shattered. The cataclysm didn't just freeze Antarctica. It flooded the rest of the planet. The meltwater pulses raised the sea levels by 400 feet. The coastlines of the world were erased. The primitive tribes living in the lowlands were washed away. The world was in chaos. Humanity had been hit by a hard reset. And into this chaos, the survivors arrived. They did not come as conquerors. They came as teachers. Every ancient culture on Earth has the same story. It is the one myth that is universal. They tell of a time of darkness and flood, and then they tell of the arrival of the gods. But these gods were not spirits. They were physical beings. They walked. They talked. They built, in Sumeria, the cradle of what we call civilization. In modern-day Iraq, the clay tablets tell the story of the Apkallu. The seven sages, the tablets describe them as emerging from the Persian Gulf. They were fish, men. They had the body of a fish, but underneath, the head of a man and the legs of a man. Historians look at this and say, it is a metaphor, but look closer at the description. Scaly skin that shimmered, heads like helmets. If you were a primitive hunter-gatherer and you saw a man walk out of the ocean wearing a wetsuit, or a pressure suit, or survival gear made of advanced materials, how would you describe him? You would say he looked like a fish. The tablets say the Apkallu did not eat. They focused only on their work. And what was their work? They taught the people how to build cities, how to found temples, how to compile laws, how to determine the borders of the land, how to plant seeds. They taught mathematics. They taught astronomy. They rebooted civilization. In Egypt, they called them the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus. The ancient Egyptian texts, the Turin Papyrus, list the kings of Egypt. We know the pharaohs Ramses, Tutankhamun, Khufu, but the list goes back further. Before the pharaohs, there were the spirits of the dead, and before them, the Shemsu Hor, a lineage of semi-divine kings who ruled for thousands of years, who possessed knowledge of the stars. Who were they? They were the tall ones, the ones with the elongated skulls, the ones with the red hair. The memory of them is etched into the stone itself. Go to the temple of Edfu in Egypt. On the walls, covered in hieroglyphs, is a text called the Building Texts. It tells the history of the first time Zep Tepi. It describes the homeland of the gods. It calls it the Island of the Egg. It says it was destroyed by a great flood and plunging darkness. It says the gods had to flee. They travelled across the ocean to Egypt to re-establish their sacred mounds. They were trying to recreate their lost home. Is this why the pyramids of Giza are aligned so perfectly? Is this why the Sphinx shows signs of water erosion, rain erosion? That could only have happened when the Sahara was a rainforest, thousands of years before the Egyptians were supposed to be there. The Orthodox timeline says that humans went from hunting gazelles with spears to building the Great Pyramid in a few hundred years. That is impossible. Architecture does not evolve that fast. You do not go from a mud hut to a structure that aligns with the speed of light and the dimensions of the Earth overnight, unless you didn't invent it, unless you brought the blueprints with you. The Great Pyramid is not a beginning. It is a culmination. It is a legacy project. It was built by the survivors to preserve the mathematics of the first civilization before it was lost forever. It is a time capsule in stone, but the strongest evidence isn't in the myths. It is in the walls. There is a specific style of building that appears all over the world in places that should have had no contact with each other. We call it polygon masonry. It is distinct, it is difficult, and it is genius. Instead of cutting bricks into squares, which is easy, the builders cut massive stones into irregular jigsaw puzzle shapes. 5 sides, 7 sides, 12 sides. And they fitted them together without mortar. No cement, just gravity and friction. But the fit is so perfect, so precise, that you cannot slide a sheet of paper between the stones today, thousands of years later. You see this in Peru at Sacsayhuaman, stones weighing 100 tons, shaped like pillows, locked together. You see it in Egypt at the Osirian Temple. You see it in Turkey, in Greece, in Japan, on Easter Island. Why? Why would cultures separated by vast oceans, who supposedly didn't know the wheel, all invent the exact same, incredibly difficult way of building walls? And why is this style earthquake-proof? When the ground shakes, square bricks crack and fall. But polygon walls, they dance. The stones interlock. They move with the tremor, and then they settle back into place. It is a technology designed for a volatile planet. A planet prone to cataclysms. The people who built these walls knew about earthquakes. They knew about stability. And they left their signature everywhere. It is the fingerprint of the Antarctic masons. They were rebuilding the infrastructure of their lost world, using the local stone, teaching the local people. Here is how you survive the shaking earth, they said. Here is how you build for eternity. But perhaps the most stunning piece of evidence was found not in a city, but on a hilltop in Turkey. Göbekli Tepe. For decades, we were told that civilization began around 6,000 years ago in Sumeria. But in the 1990s, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt began digging a mound in Turkey. He found stone circles, massive T-shaped pillars, beautifully carved with animals, foxes, lions, spiders, scorpions. When they carbon dated the site, the scientific community went into shock. It was 11,600 years old. That date should ring a bell. 11,600 years ago is the exact end of the Younger Dryas. It is the exact moment the ice began to melt. It is the exact moment the climate stabilized. And right at that moment, out of nowhere, a group of hunter-gatherers, suddenly came together and built the most complex stone temple the world had ever seen. Without agriculture, without metal tools, without a written language, it makes no sense. Unless they had help, unless Göbekli Tepe was a transfer point. Imagine the survivors landing. They meet the locals primitive, struggling in the post-cataclysmic world. The survivors say, "We need to teach you. We need to jump, start your culture." So they build a center, a university of stone. They carve the animals to teach the stars. They align the pillars to Sirius and the belt of Orion. They teach agriculture. Genetic studies show that the first domesticated wheat in the world originated right next to Göbekli Tepe. They teach animal husbandry. They pass the torch, and then they bury it. That is the strangest part of Göbekli Tepe. After using it for 1,000 years, the people deliberately buried it. They covered it with sand. They hid it. Why? Were they protecting it? Or were they afraid of it? Or did the gods tell them, "Our time is done, we are fading, bury the temple, preserve the message"? Because the survivors were dying out. They were a limited population. They could interbreed with humans, but their royal blood, the genes of the giants, was diluting. The lifespan of the gods shortened. In the Sumerian king list, the early kings rule for 40,000 years, then 20,000, then 1,000, then 100, then normal human lifespans. It is a graph of genetic dilution. The giants became men, the men became myths, and the homeland became a dream. We have spent thousands of years looking for Atlantis. Plato described it clearly: a concentric city, a naval power, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, destroyed in a single day and night of misfortune. We looked in the Mediterranean. We looked in the Caribbean. We looked in the Atlantic, but maybe we looked at the wrong map. Plato said Atlantis was larger than Libya and Asia combined. There is only one landmass that fits that description: Antarctica. Plato said it was the way to the other islands. If you look at the Earth from the bottom, Antarctica is the hub, the center of the wheel. The oceans are the spokes. It was the connection point between the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean. It was the center of the world. And now, it is the center of the silence. The survivors did their job. They rebooted us. They gave us the seeds of civilization. They gave us the memory of the stars, and then they laid down and died. Their bones are in the mounds of North America. Their skulls are in the sands of Peru. Their DNA is in the blood of the isolated tribes, but their soul is still in the ice. And now the cycle is closing. The ice that covered their cities is melting. The water is rising again. The climate is shifting again. We are standing on the precipice of the same disaster that claimed them. And as the ice recedes, it is revealing the things they left behind, things that were not meant to be found yet, things that have been active this whole time. We are going to look at the modern Antarctica now, the Antarctica of the 21st century, the Antarctica of neutrino detectors and black sites. We are going to ask why the most advanced telescope in the world, the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory, is built exactly at the South Pole. Are they looking up at the stars, or are they listening to something pulsing in the ground beneath them? The legacy is not just stone. It is a signal. And someone is finally answering the phone. We have spoken of the ancients. We have spoken of the refugees. But now we must speak of the watchers. If you go to the South Pole today, to the Amundsen Scott Station, you will find one of the strangest structures ever built by human hands. It is not a bunker. It is not a radar. It is a telescope. But it does not look at the sky. It looks at the ground. It is called Russ Ice Cube, the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. The scale of this machine is difficult to comprehend. Drilled deep into the pristine, crystal, clear ice of the plateau are 86 holes. Each hole is 1.5 miles deep. Dropped into these holes are over 5,000 optical sensors, digital eyes, encased in pressure-resistant glass spheres. They are suspended in the dark, frozen silence, waiting. Waiting for what? Officially, they are waiting for neutrinos. Neutrinos are ghost particles. They are subatomic particles created by violent events in the universe, exploding stars, black holes, gamma ray bursts. They are so small, and they move so fast, that they pass right through solid matter. Trillions of them are passing through your body right now. They pass through the earth as if it were smoke. But occasionally, very occasionally, a neutrino crashes into an atom of ice. When it does, it creates a tiny flash of blue light, Cherenkov radiation. The sensors detect this blue flash. They map it. They trace the path of the particle back to its source. Scientists say they built it at the South Pole because the ice is pure. It is the perfect medium for detection. But there is a strangeness to the project. Neutrinos come from space, so logic suggests you should look up. But IceCube looks down. It uses the entire mass of the Earth as a filter. It looks for neutrinos that have travelled through the planet, entering at the North Pole and exiting at the South. It is scanning the core of the Earth. But conspiracy theorists and even some uneasy researchers have asked a different question. What if they aren't looking for particles coming from space? What if they are looking for a signal coming from inside the ice? In 2016, IceCube detected something that shouldn't happen. High-energy neutrinos. Extremely high energy, but they didn't match the signature of a distant supernova. They seemed to originate locally. Is it possible that the machinery of the first civilization, the pyramid power plants, the geothermal engines, is emitting a signature? Neutrinos are a byproduct of nuclear reactions. They are a byproduct of high energy physics. If there is a dormant reactor buried in the Gamburtsev Mountains, or a zero-point energy device sealed in the Vostok anomaly, it would be glowing with neutrinos. It would be a beacon in the dark. And IceCube would be the only camera in the world capable of seeing it. Is this the real reason the US government spent nearly $300 million to bury wires in the ice? Is it a telescope? Or is it a gauger counter for Atlantis? There are whispers of other technologies, too. Deep in the dark sector of the South Pole Station, the restricted zone where no light is allowed, ostensibly to protect the telescopes, there are other arrays. The South Pole Telescope, the BCEAP array. They measure the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the Big Bang. But they also measure gravity waves, and gravity waves are the key to seeing what is hidden. Ground-penetrating radar can only go so deep. Ice is thick, rock is thicker, but gravity sees everything. If you have a massive cavern underground, the gravity there is slightly weaker because there is less mass. If you have a massive concentration of metal, say a sunken city or a craft, the gravity is slightly stronger, and the gravity maps of Antarctica are flashing red. Let's travel to Wilkes Land, a vast, frozen region of East Antarctica. Here, satellites detected a mascon, a mass concentration, Something incredibly heavy is buried under the ice. It is 300 miles wide. To put that in perspective, that is twice the size of the Chicxulub asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. It is buried inside a crater that is hidden by the ice sheet. The conventional explanation is that it is a massive meteor, a planet killer, that hit the Earth 250 million years ago. But the magnetic signature is strange. Space rocks are messy. This anomaly has a structure. Some researchers have suggested that the mascon is not a rock. It is a hole. A metal object 300 miles wide crashed into the continent, or parked there. If the first civilization had flight, if they had the Vimanas described in the Indian Vedas, did they have a mothership? Did the city of the gods not fall from the sky, but land? The Wilkes land anomaly sits there, a dark gravitational bruise on the planet, pulsing with mass, and we are just walking on top of it, oblivious. But the ice is not static. The ice is moving, and as the climate changes, the mask is slipping. The ice is melting. We hear this on the news every day. It is framed as a catastrophe, a climate emergency, and it is. But for the archaeologists of the impossible, it is also an opportunity. As the glaciers retreat, they are revealing things that haven't seen the sun for 12,000 years. But there are places where the ice is melting from the inside out. Let us go to Mount Erebus. It is the southernmost active volcano on Earth. A towering peak of fire and ice. It smokes constantly, casting a grey plume over the white landscape. But around the base of Erebus and its sister volcanoes, something magical is happening. The heat from the magma vents is melting the ice from below. It creates caves, massive, cathedral-like caverns under the glaciers. These are not dark, cold caves. They are warm. The temperature inside can reach 77 degrees Fahrenheit, 25 degrees Celsius. You could walk through them in a t-shirt. Sunlight filters down through the thin ice ceiling, creating a blue ethereal glow. It is a greenhouse, and in 2017, scientists from the Australian National University ventured into these caves. They took samples of the soil. They were expecting to find simple moss or algae, but when they analysed the DNA, they found traces of something else. Complex DNA, unidentified DNA. We found DNA of arthropods, springtails, and mites, said Dr. Seridwen Fraser. But there were also sequences that did not match any known species. Unknown species. Living in the warm caves of Antarctica. If tiny insects can survive there, what else can? The caves are massive. Some are miles long. They are interconnected. A network of tunnels running deep into the earth. Could a larger ecosystem exist down there? Could the plants of the green Antarctica have survived the flash freeze by retreating into the volcanic refuges? Ferns, trees, animals, and people. The legends of the hollow earth often sound like fantasy. But here we have the scientific mechanism for it. Warm, habitable, light-filled caverns hidden beneath the ice. If you were a survivor of the cataclysm, you wouldn't need to flee to Peru. You could just go downstairs. You could retreat into the veins of the volcano, and if you stayed there, isolated, evolving, for 12,000 years, what would you become? Would you lose your pigment? Would your eyes grow large to see in the dim blue light? Would you become the grey, beings that appear in modern folklore? It is a chilling thought that while we are searching the stars for alien life, a second intelligent species might be living in the basement of our own planet. And now, the door is opening, the ice is thinning, the roof of the caves is collapsing, Satellites are spotting holes opening up in the ice sheet, not crevices, perfectly round holes, vents. Is something coming out? In 2018, a video surfaced from a Russian research team. It showed a piece of ice breaking off a glacier, and embedded in the ice was a structure. It looked like a pillar or a statue. The video was grainy. It was quickly dismissed as a hoax or a trick of the light. But the reports keep coming. Pilots Flying Supply Runs report black pyramids emerging from the snow as the winds strip away the cover. Hikers and explorers, the few who are allowed to go off trail, report finding perfectly smooth stone blocks. The thaw is a revelation, and the governments know it. This is the race. Why is there such a push to colonize Mars right now? Why is there such a panic about the environment? Is it just about sustainability, or is it because they know that the great reveal is inevitable? When the ice melts, the truth comes out. You can hide a city under 2 miles of ice. You cannot hide it when the ice is gone. If the ruins of the first civilization are exposed to the world, if a kid with a drone can fly over the coast of Antarctica and live stream a video of a pyramid, the game is over. The history books have to be burned. The religions of the world have to answer awkward questions. The energy companies have to explain why we are still burning oil when the technology to save us has been sitting in the freezer for 10 millennia. It is a panic event. So perhaps the strategy is manage disclosure. Release the Navy videos of the UFOs. They did that in 2017. Admit that there are unexplained phenomena. Talk about the mystery of Antarctica in soft tones. Prepare the public. Acclimate us to the idea that we are not alone and that we are not the first. Because when the day comes, when the first camera crew walks into the Hall of Records under the ice, it will be the biggest moment in human history, or the most dangerous, because we might find that the first civilization didn't just leave behind books. They left behind their weapons, and if those weapons are still active, and if the watchers in the warm caves are still guarding them, then the melting of the ice is not just a climate disaster. It is a countdown on a bomb. The ice is a barrier, but barriers are made to be broken. We have drilled the holes. We have sent the radar. We have melted the caves. We are poking the sleeping giant. And soon the giant will wake up. But before we confront the end of the story, we must ask one final question about the beginning. Where did they come from? If the first civilization was here 50,000 years ago, and they were advanced, and they were different from us, did they evolve here, from the apes? Or did they arrive? We are going to look at the stars. We are going to look at the connection between the ice and the cosmos. Because the Piri Reis map doesn't just show the coast. It shows the stars, and the stars tell a story of arrival. We have spoken of the ancients. We have spoken of the refugees. But now we must speak of the watchers. If you go to the South Pole today, to the Amundsen Scott Station, you will find one of the strangest structures ever built by human hands. It is not a bunker. It is not a radar. It is a telescope, but it does not look at the sky. It looks at the ground. It is called Phase Ice Cube, the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. The scale of this machine is difficult to comprehend. Drilled deep into the pristine, crystal clear ice of the plateau are 86 holes. Each hole is 1.5 miles deep. Dropped into these holes are over 5,000 optical sensors, digital eyes encased in pressure-resistant glass spheres. They are suspended in the dark, frozen silence, waiting. Waiting for what? Officially, they are waiting for neutrinos. Neutrinos are ghost particles. They are subatomic particles created by violent events in the universe, exploding stars, black holes, gamma, ray bursts. They are so small and they move so fast that they pass right through solid matter. Trillions of them are passing through your body right now. They pass through the earth as if it were smoke. But occasionally, very occasionally, a neutrino crashes into an atom of ice. When it does, it creates a tiny flash of blue light, Cherenkov radiation. The sensors detect this blue flash. They map it. They trace the path of the particle back to its source. Scientists say they built it at the South Pole because the ice is pure. It is the perfect medium for detection. But there is a strangeness to the project. Neutrinos come from space. So logic suggests you should look up. But IceCube looks down. It uses the entire mass of the Earth as a filter. It looks for neutrinos that have traveled through the planet, entering at the North Pole and exiting at the South. It is scanning the core of the Earth. But conspiracy theorists, and even some uneasy researchers, have asked a different question. What if they aren't looking for particles coming from space? What if they are looking for a signal coming from inside the ice? In 2016, IceCube detected something that shouldn't happen. High energy neutrinos. Extremely high energy. But they didn't match the signature of a distant supernova. They seem to originate locally. Is it possible that the machinery of the first civilization, the pyramid power plants, the geothermal engines, is emitting a signature? Neutrinos are a byproduct of nuclear reactions. They are a byproduct of high energy physics. If there is a dormant reactor buried in the Gambartsev Mountains, or a 0-point energy device sealed in the Vostok anomaly, it would be glowing with neutrinos. It would be a beacon in the dark, and IceCube would be the only camera in the world capable of seeing it. Is this the real reason the US government spent nearly $300 million to bury wires in the ice? Is it a telescope? Or is it a Geiger counter for Atlantis? There are whispers of other technologies too. Deep in the dark sector of the South Pole Station, the restricted zone where no light is allowed, ostensibly to protect the telescopes, there are other arrays. The South Pole Telescope, the BiCEP array. They measure the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the Big Bang. But they also measure gravity waves, and gravity waves are the key to seeing what is hidden. Ground-penetrating radar can only go so deep. Ice is thick, rock is thicker, but gravity sees everything. If you have a massive cavern underground, the gravity there is slightly weaker because there is less mass. If you have a massive concentration of metal, say a sunken city or a craft, the gravity is slightly stronger, and the gravity maps of Antarctica are flashing red. Let's travel to Wilkes Land, a vast frozen region of East Antarctica. Here, satellites detected a mass concentration. Something incredibly heavy is buried under the ice. It is 300 miles wide. To put that in perspective, that is twice the size of the Chicxulub asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. It is buried inside a crater that is hidden by the ice sheet. The conventional explanation is that it is a massive meteor, a planet killer, that hit the Earth 250 million years ago. But the magnetic signature is strange. Space rocks are messy. This anomaly has a structure. Some researchers have suggested that the mascon is not a rock, it is a hole. A metal object 300 miles wide crashed into the continent. Or, parked there, if the first civilization had flight, if they had the Vimanas described in the Indian Vedas, did they have a mothership? Did the city of the gods not fall from the sky, but land? The Wilkes Land anomaly sits there, a dark gravitational bruise on the planet, pulsing with mass, and we are just walking on top of it, oblivious. But the ice is not static. The ice is moving, and as the climate changes, the mask is slipping. The ice is melting. We hear this on the news every day. It is framed as a catastrophe, a climate emergency, and it is. But for the archaeologists of the impossible, it is also an opportunity. As the glaciers retreat, they are revealing things that haven't seen the sun for 12,000 years. But there are places where the ice is melting from the inside out. Let us go to Mount Erebus. It is the southernmost active volcano on Earth, a towering peak of fire and ice. It smokes constantly, casting a grey plume over the white landscape. But around the base of Erebus and its sister volcanoes, something magical is happening. The heat from the magma vents is melting the ice from below. It creates caves, massive, cathedral-like caverns under the glaciers. These are not dark, cold caves. They are warm. The temperature inside can reach 77 degrees Fahrenheit, 25 degrees Celsius. You could walk through them in a t-shirt. Sunlight filters down through the thin ice ceiling, creating a blue, ethereal glow. It is a greenhouse. And in 2017, scientists from the Australian National University ventured into these caves. They took samples of the soil. They were expecting to find simple moss or algae, but when they analyzed the DNA, they found traces of something else. Complex DNA, unidentified DNA. We found DNA of arthropods, springtails, and mites, said Dr. Seridwen Fraser. But there were also sequences that did not match any known species. Unknown species, living in the warm caves of Antarctica. If tiny insects can survive there, what else can? The caves are massive. Some are miles long. They are interconnected. A network of tunnels running deep into the earth. Could a larger ecosystem exist down there? Could the plants of the green Antarctica have survived the flash freeze by retreating into the volcanic refuges? Ferns, trees, animals, and people. The legends of the hollow earth often sound like fantasy. But here we have the scientific mechanism for it. Warm, habitable, light-filled caverns hidden beneath the ice. If you were a survivor of the cataclysm, you wouldn't need to flee to Peru. You could just go downstairs. You could retreat into the veins of the volcano. And if you stayed there, isolated, evolving for 12,000 years, what would you become? Would you lose your pigment? Would your eyes grow large to see in the dim blue light? Would you become the grey? Beings that appear in modern folklore. It is a chilling thought that while we are searching the stars for alien life, a second intelligent species might be living in the basement of our own planet. And now, the door is opening. The ice is thinning. The roof of the caves is collapsing. Satellites are spotting holes opening up in the ice sheet. Not crevasses, perfectly round holes. Vents. Is something coming out? In 2018, a video surfaced from a Russian research team. It showed a piece of ice breaking off a glacier, and embedded in the ice was a structure. It looked like a pillar or a statue. The video was grainy. It was quickly dismissed as a hoax or a trick of the light. But the reports keep coming. Pilots flying supply runs report black pyramids, emerging from the snow as the winds strip away the cover. Hikers and explorers, the few who are allowed to go off, trail, report finding perfectly smooth stone blocks. The thaw is a revelation, and the governments know it. This is the race. Why is there such a push to colonize Mars right now? Why is there such a panic about the environment? Is it just about sustainability? Or is it because they know that the great reveal is inevitable? When the ice melts, the truth comes out. You can hide a city under 2 miles of ice. You cannot hide it when the ice is gone. If the ruins of the first civilization are exposed to the world, if a kid with a drone can fly over the coast of Antarctica and live stream a video of a pyramid, the game is over. The history books have to be burned. The religions of the world have to answer awkward questions. The energy companies have to explain why we are still burning oil when the technology to save us has been sitting in the freezer for 10 millennia. It is a panic event. So perhaps the strategy is manage disclosure. Release the Navy videos of the UFOs. They did that in 2017. Admit that there are unexplained phenomena. Talk about the mystery of Antarctica in soft tones. Prepare the public. Acclimate us to the idea that we are not alone, and that we are not the first, because when the day comes, when the first camera crew walks into the Hall of Records under the ice, it will be the biggest moment in human history, or the most dangerous, because we might find that the first civilization didn't just leave behind books, they left behind their weapons. And if those weapons are still active, and if the watchers in the warm caves are still guarding them, then the melting of the ice is not just a climate disaster. It is a countdown on a bomb. The ice is a barrier, but barriers are made to be broken. We have drilled the holes. We have sent the radar. We have melted the caves. We are poking the sleeping giant. And soon the giant will wake up. But before we confront the end of the story, we must ask one final question about the beginning. Where did they come from? If the first civilization was here 50,000 years ago, and they were advanced, and they were different from us, did they evolve here from the apes? Or did they arrive? We are going to look at the stars. We are going to look at the connection between the ice and the cosmos. Because the Piri Reis map doesn't just show the coast, it shows the stars. And the stars tell a story of arrival. We have spent hours looking down, examining the ice, examining the rocks, examining the bones. But to understand the beginning of the story, we must look up, because the Piri Reis map, the gazelle skin that started this entire journey, has one more secret to tell. We focused on the coastline, we focused on the rivers of Queen Maud Land, but we ignored the margins. Dr. Charles Hapgood, the professor who analysed the map in the 1960s, noticed something strange about the orientation. The map is not just a map of the Earth, it is a star chart. The projection of the map, the mathematical formula used to flatten the globe onto the paper, seems to be based on a specific celestial alignment. It aligns with the position of the stars as seen from the southern hemisphere, but not the stars of 1513, and not the stars of today, due to the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of the Earth on its axis. The position of the stars changes over thousands of years. The stars on the Piri Reis map align with the sky of 10,000 BC. The same date, always the same date. 10,000 BC, 12,000 years ago, the end of the Ice Age. The date of the Sphinx. The date of the CATACLYSM. Whoever drew the source maps was navigating by a sky that no longer exists. But why? Why would a civilization on Earth be so obsessed with the stars? Every ancient culture, the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Sumerians, was fixated on astronomy. They didn't just watch the stars, they mimicked them. The pyramids of Giza mimic the belt of Orion. The temples of Angkor Wat mimic the constellation Draco. The stone circles of Göbekli Tepe align with Sirius. They were building a mirror of the heavens on the ground. As above, so below. This is the Hermetic maxim, the key to all alchemy, the key to all magic. But perhaps it is not magic. Perhaps it is a coordinate system. If you were a traveller, a voyager from a distant shore, and you landed on a strange planet, what is the first thing you would do? You would build a beacon. You would arrange your camp to align with your home. You would carve the coordinates of your origin into the stone, so that you would never forget where you came from. Or, so that someone else could find you. Is it possible that the first civilization was not born here? Is it possible that the green Antarctica was not an evolutionary cradle, but a colony? Biology offers us a puzzle. Humans are strange animals. We are the only species on Earth that is not suited to its environment. We have no fur to keep us warm. We have no claws to defend ourselves. Our skin burns in the sun. Our backs ache from walking upright. We have enormous heads that make childbirth dangerous and painful. We act like a species that evolved somewhere else. Somewhere with lower gravity, somewhere with a different light. And then, we were dropped here. Dropped onto a harsh, high gravity freezing world. And we survived, but we never truly fit in. We always looked at the stars with a sense of longing, a sense of homesickness. If the first civilization arrived here, they would have chosen the place that looked most like home. Maybe Antarctica, with its long days and unique magnetic field, was the most comfortable landing zone. But they didn't come alone. They brought their technology, and they put something in orbit to watch over them, something that is still there. In 1954, 3 years before the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first human satellite, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and the San Francisco Examiner ran a story. The headline read, "Artificial satellites are circling Earth." The US Air Force had detected 2 objects in orbit. This was impossible. Humans had not yet achieved spaceflight. There were no rockets capable of putting a payload into stable orbit. But the radar didn't lie. There were 2 of them. One was large, one was smaller, and they were in a polar orbit. This is a critical detail. When we launch satellites today, we usually put them in an equatorial orbit. We launch them from west to east to use the Earth's rotation as a boost. They circle the waist of the planet. A polar orbit, going north to south over the poles, is much harder to achieve. It requires more energy. But it has one massive advantage. If you orbit the equator, you only see the middle of the Earth. If you orbit the poles, the Earth spins underneath you. Every 24 hours, you scan the entire surface of the planet. Every inch. If you were a surveillance probe, a sentinel sent to map a planet, you would choose a polar orbit. Astronomers began to track the object. They called it the Black Knight satellite. It was erratic. It moved at speeds that defied our understanding of orbital mechanics. It was heavy, estimated to weigh over 100 tons. For context, Sputnik weighed 184 pounds. In 1960, a committee was formed to study it. Gordon Cooper, the American astronaut, claimed to have seen it visually during his Mercury mission. He described a dark, Greenish object with a metallic shine. NASA dismissed it. Space junk, they said. A thermal blanket lost during a spacewalk. But the black night was detected before there were any spacewalks, before there was any junk. So what is it? Is it a piece of the first civilization's technology? A satellite launched from the Antarctic spaceport 12,000 years ago. A time capsule in orbit. Perhaps it was programmed to wake up when we reached a certain level of technology. In the 1920s and 30s, radio operators, including Nikola Tesla and Guglielmo Marconi, reported receiving strange, rhythmic signals from space. Long-delayed echoes. Tesla believed he was listening to a conversation between planets. I have a deep conviction. Tesla wrote that highly intelligent beings exist on Mars. Was the Black Knight relaying a signal? And if so, who was it talking to? This brings us to the Red Planet. If we are looking for the origins of the Antarctic civilization, we cannot ignore our neighbor. Mars is a dead world now, a desert of rust and radiation. But we know with absolute certainty that it was once like Earth. It had oceans, it had rivers, it had a thick atmosphere, it had a magnetic field, it was blue. And then it died. Some catastrophe stripped away its atmosphere and dried up its oceans. But before it died was their life. In 1976, the Viking 1 orbiter snapped a photo of the Cydonia region of Mars. Frame 35A72. It showed a landscape of mesas and hills. But one hill stood out. It looked like a face, a massive human face looking up at the sky. It had eyes, a nose, a mouth. It wore a headdress like an Egyptian pharaoh. NASA immediately dismissed it. A trick of light and shadow, they said. Pareidolia. But then they looked at the surrounding area. Near the face there is a cluster of mountains. They are shaped like pyramids. One of them, the D&M pyramid, is a 5-sided structure that aligns perfectly with the cardinal directions of Mars. It looks shockingly similar to the pyramid in the Ellsworth Mountains of Antarctica. The geometry is the same. The alignment is the same. Is it possible that Cydonia and Antarctica were built by the same architects? There is a theory, the directed panspermia, theory that suggests life on Earth did not start here. It was brought here. Imagine a civilization on Mars millions of years ago. They are advanced. They are thriving. But they see the end coming. Their core is cooling. Their magnetic field is collapsing. Their atmosphere is leaking into space. They realize their planet is dying. So they look for a lifeboat. They look at the blue planet next door, Earth. It is wild. It is dangerous. It is full of giant lizards, dinosaurs. But it is habitable. So they send an ark, or perhaps they send a seed ship. They land in the most hospitable place they can find, Antarctica's, which was tropical at the time. They build their colony. They build their pyramids to tap into the planet's energy. They use their genetic technology to adapt themselves to the new gravity. They become the first civilization, the gods. But they are cursed. They escaped a dying planet, only to be hit by a cosmic impact on their new home. The universe threw a rock at them. The Younger Dryas impact. It is a tragedy of cosmic proportions. A refugee species hunted by extinction across the solar system. This would explain why we have no missing link in human evolution. Why did the human brain triple in size in such a short evolutionary window? Why did we suddenly gain the ability to do calculus, write symphonies, and build rockets? Darwinian evolution is slow. It takes millions of years to grow a slightly longer beak. But humans, we exploded. Maybe we didn't evolve. Maybe we were upgraded. Maybe the sons of God, mentioned in Genesis, the ones who came in unto the daughters of men, were the Martian refugees. They interbred with the local hominids. They spliced their DNA with ours. We are the hybrids. We are the children of Mars and Earth. This explains the R negative blood mystery. Most humans have a protein in their blood called the rhesus factor, Rh+. We share this with the rhesus monkey. It links us to the primate family tree. But about 15% of humans are R negative. They lack the monkey protein. If a R negative woman gets pregnant with a R positive baby, her body will attack the fetus. Her immune system treats the baby as an alien invader. Why? Why would a mother's body reject her own child? Evolution does not design species to kill their own offspring, unless the two lineages were not meant to mix, unless one lineage is from Earth and the other is from somewhere else. The Basque people of Spain and France have the highest concentration of R negative blood in the world. They also speak a language, Euskara, that is unrelated to any other language on Earth. Are they a remnant of the pure line? Are they the descendants of the Antarctic refugees who fled to Europe? If we look at this through the lens of science fiction, it is aliens. If we look at it through the lens of religion, it is angels. The Book of Enoch, an ancient text excluded from the Bible, tells the story of the Watchers, 200 angels who descended to Earth. And they descended on Ards, which is the summit of Mount Hermon. But some translations suggest the location was not Hermon, but a mountain in the south. The Watchers were not ethereal spirits. They were physical. They had leaders Samyaza Azazel. They brought technology, and Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and the art of making up the eyes. They taught metallurgy. They taught cosmetics. They taught astronomy, but they broke the rules. They mated with human women. They created a race of giants called the Nephilim. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants whose height was 3,000 ells. The legends say that the Creator was angry. He sent a great flood to wipe out the giants and cleanse the earth. The parallels are exact. The Watchers to the Antarctic civilization, the Nephilim, the Paracas giants, the Great Flood, the Younger Dryas meltwater pulse. We are reading the same history book. One is written in the language of theology, the other in the language of geology, but the story is the same. A superior intelligence arrives. They settle. They breed. They build. They are destroyed by water. But what happened to the Watchers themselves? The Book of Enoch says they were not killed. They were imprisoned. Bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dedale, and cast him therein. And cover him with rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light. Cast into the darkness, covered with jagged rocks, covered so he may not see light. That sounds like being buried under an ice sheet. What if the prison of the fallen angels is not in a metaphysical hell, but in physical Antarctica? What if they are still there, bound in the jagged rocks of the Gamburtsev Mountains, covered in the darkness of the polar night, waiting for the judgment day, or waiting for the parole hearing? This adds a terrifying dimension to the black budget interest. If the leaders of the world are going to Antarctica to meet with entities, are they meeting with the Watchers? Are they making deals with Azazel? Is the technology we have developed in the last 70 years, transistors, fiber optics, lasers, stealth, the result of human genius? Or is it forbidden knowledge that was traded? Did we sell our soul for the iPhone? The star connection suggests that Antarctica is not just a continent, it is an embassy between Earth and the cosmos. And for 12,000 years, the embassy has been closed. The doors were frozen shut, but now the ice is melting. The diplomats are flying in. The signals from the Black Night are getting stronger. The embassy is about to reopen. And we, the general public, are the last to know. But there is one more possibility, one that is even stranger than aliens or angels. What if they are not from space? What if they are from us here? What if the Earth is not what we think it is? We live on the surface. We crawl around on the skin of the planet like fleas, but the skin is thin. And the interior is deep. The hollow Earth theory was the obsession of the Nazis, but it is also part of the Buddhist tradition, AGARTHA, Shambhalat. It is part of the Native American tradition, the emergence from the underworld. Is Antarctica the back door? Is the hole, seen in the satellite images, not an entrance to a bunker, but an entrance to the interior? We are going to go deep now, past the ice, past the rock, into the realm of the inner world. We are taught from childhood that the Earth is a solid ball. We are told it has a thin crust, a hot mantle, and a molten iron core. We are told that nothing exists down there but pressure and fire. But what if the Earth is not a rock? What if it is a geode? A geode is a rock that looks dull and solid on the outside, but if you crack it open, it is hollow on the inside, lined with crystals, filled with empty space. This is the hollow Earth theory. To modern science, it is laughable. It is impossible. Gravity would crush a hollow sphere. But to the ancients, it was not a theory. It was a geography. The Buddhists call it Shastagartha. They believe it is a kingdom located deep inside the Earth's crust, a place of peace, a place of advanced wisdom. They believe that the king of Agartha, the king of the world, controls the destiny of the surface from his throne in the center. The Tibetans call it Sessis Shammala. They say that there are physical entrances to this world hidden in the Himalayas and in the poles. The Native Americans, the Hopi, the Navajo, believe that their ancestors emerged from the underworld. They didn't come across a land bridge from Asia. They climbed up, out of the earth. Why does every culture, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, have the same story? The story of the inner world. And why does Antarctica always feature as the door? If you look at a globe, the poles are the points of least rotation. They are the anchor points. If the Earth were to have an opening, navel, it would be at the poles. This brings us back to Admiral Richard E. Byrd. We mentioned his 1947 flight earlier, but we must look closer at the specific details of his alleged diary. On February 1997, Byrd took off from his base station for a flight over the North Pole. Though later accounts and the context of Highjump suggest a conflation with his southern explorations. In the diary, he records his instruments going haywire, the compass spinning, and then he describes the ice disappearing. There is no ice and snow, he writes. On the port side there are mountain ranges. The instrument board is still gyrating. He flies over the mountains, and on the other side he sees something impossible. There is a green valley below. The light here seems different. I cannot see the sun anymore. He claims to see forests. He claims to see a river. And he claims to see a mammoth-like animal moving through the underbrush. It looks like an elephant. No. It looks more like a mammoth. This is incredible. As he flies further, he spots a city. It is glistening with rainbow hues. It is made of a crystal-like substance. As his radio crackles, a voice speaks to him, not in English, but in a language that sounds Germanic, but with a strange accent. Welcome to our domain, Admiral. We shall land you in exactly 7 minutes. His plane is taken over by a tractor beam. He lands. He is taken to meet the master. The master tells him, "You have entered the inner world of the Ariane." He warns Byrd about nuclear weapons. He says that the surface world is racing toward its own destruction, and that the inner world is watching. We have never interfered before in your race's wars, but now we must, for you have learned to tamper with a certain power that is not for man, namely that of atomic energy. It sounds like a fever dream, a hallucination, but consider the context. Byrd was a military man, a disciplined explorer. Why would he write a science fiction story in his private diary? Unless it wasn't fiction, unless he actually flew into the mantle plume cavities that we now know exist. Maybe he didn't fly to the center of the Earth. Maybe he flew into a massive geothermal oasis, hidden under the ice sheet, obscured by the eternal fog of the polar mix, a place where the first civilization had retreated, the Ariane, the Aryans. This word has a dark history, but originally in Sanskrit, Arya simply meant noble, the noble ones, the light-skinned, high-caste teachers who brought civilization to India and Persia. The Nazis stole the word. They twisted it, but they were obsessed with the origin of it. They believed the Aryans were not Germans, but survivors from the North Thule, or the South Antarctica, who had lost their homeland. They believed that by finding Agartha, they could tap into the Vril. What is Vril? In 1871, a British author named Edward Bulwer Lytton wrote a book called The Coming Race. It described a subterranean civilization that powered their society with a mysterious energy called Vril. It was a liquid energy. It could heal. It could destroy. It could make things fly. The book was fiction, but the Nazis believed it was a coded truth. The Vril Society, a secret society of occultists in pre-war Germany, believed that Vril was real. They believed it was the energy of the life force itself, 0-point energy, and they believed that the masters of the inner earth used it to power their flying ships, their Vimanas. Maria Orsic, the famous medium of the Vril Society, claimed to be in telepathic communication with these beings. She produced sketches of circular flying machines, technical diagrams that were far ahead of 1920s engineering. These diagrams led to the development of the D-Glock. The Belv and the Honabu saucer projects. Did they succeed? Did the Nazis build flying saucers using ancient blueprints telepathically received from Antarctica? It sounds insane, but look at the technology jump. In 1938, we had biplanes. By 1945, the Germans had jet fighters, made 2662, ballistic missiles, a V2, and cruise missiles, a V1. They leapt forward 50 years in technology in just 5 years. General Hans Kammler, the head of the Nazi secret weapons projects, disappeared at the end of the war. He was never found. Did he go to Argentina? Did he go to the base in Neuschwabenland? And did he take the bell with him? If there is an inner earth, and if there is a civilization down there possessing real energy, then the stakes of the Antarctic game change completely. We are not just looking for ruins. We are looking for the power grid. Imagine an energy source that is limitless, clean, powerful. It would end the oil industry overnight. It would end the banking system. It would liberate humanity. Or it would destroy it. The master, in Byrd's diary, warned about our immaturity. He said we weren't ready. Maybe that is why the silence is so heavy. Maybe the governments of the world have made contact. Maybe they have found the entrance. But they were told, go away. You are children playing with matches. Come back when you grow up. So they built the fence, the Antarctic Treaty. They quarantined the nursery. Let us step back from the occult for a moment. Let us look at the geology. Is a hollow Earth physically possible? A completely hollow shell? No. Gravity doesn't work that way. The crust would collapse. But if our honeycomb Earth, that is a different story. We know that the Earth's crust is riddled with caves. Mammoth Cave in Kentucky stretches for 400 miles. The Sun Dune Cave in Vietnam is so big it has its own weather system. Clouds form inside it. These are just the ones we have found near the surface. What happens deep down? Geologists tell us that at a certain depth, the pressure closes all pores, the rock becomes plastic. But recently, scientists discovered a massive ocean of water trapped in the rock of the mantle 400 miles down. It's called ringwoodite. It holds 3 times as much water as all the oceans on the surface combined. If there is water down there, is there space? Could the Earth be like a sponge? Massive, interconnected caverns, stabilized by exotic physics we don't understand yet. Caves the size of continents. If you lived in one of these mega caves, deep in the crust, powered by the geothermal glow of the core, you would be safe. Asteroids couldn't hit you. Ice ages couldn't freeze you. Solar flares couldn't burn you. It is the ultimate survival bunker. And if the first civilization knew the cataclysm was coming, they wouldn't just build a few small shelters. They would have geo-engineered the planet. They would have expanded the natural caverns. They would have moved inside. Maybe they are still there. Maybe the UFOs we see coming out of the oceans and out of the volcanoes are not coming from other planets. They are just the neighbors commuting. It explains why they are so interested in our nuclear weapons, why they shut down our missile silos as reported by Air Force officers. They live downstairs. If we blow up the house, the basement collapses too. They are protecting their investment. So, where is the door? Byrd said it was beyond the pole. The satellites show the hole in the ice. The Nazis believed it was in Queen Maud Land. But maybe the door is not physical. Maybe it is vibrational. Shambhala is described as a pure land. You cannot walk there. You have to be invited. You have to raise your frequency. Is the Vostok anomaly a gate, a stargate, or an earth gate? We are standing on the roof of a mystery that goes down 4,000 miles. And we are just starting to hear the knocking from below. As we approach the end of our journey, we must look at the final piece of the puzzle, the timeline. We have spoken of the past, the pre-ice aged. We have spoken of the present, the hidden bassist. But what about the future? Why is the activity ramping up and now? Why is the ice melting as now? The cycle is closing. The great year is ending, and the sleepers are waking up. We often think of the ground beneath our feet as stable, as a rock, but the rock is not solid, and the ground is not stable. We are floating on a thin crust. spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, hurtling through a shooting gallery of cosmic radiation, the only thing that keeps us alive, the only thing that prevents our atmosphere from being stripped away like Mars, is the magnetic field. The invisible shield. It is generated by the churning of molten iron in the core. It wraps around the planet, deflecting the solar wind, keeping the air in and the radiation out, but the shield is failing. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is mainstream geophysics. Since we began measuring it in the 1800s, the Earth's magnetic field has weakened by about 10%. In some places, it is much weaker. There is a bruise on the planet, a massive dent in the shield called the S, South Atlantic anomaly. It stretches from Brazil across the ocean to, you guessed it, Antarctica. In this region, the radiation from space dips dangerously close to the surface. Satellites passing over it have to shut down their electronics to avoid being fried. Hubble turns off its eyes when it crosses it. It is growing. It is expanding westward, and the magnetic poles, the north and the south, are moving. For centuries, the North Magnetic Pole wandered slowly around the Canadian Arctic. But in the 1990s, it picked up speed. It started racing across the ocean towards Siberia at 5 miles a year. The South Magnetic Pole has left the continent of Antarctica and is heading for Australia. The Earth is getting ready to flip. Geomagnetic reversal. It has happened hundreds of times in Earth's history. The north becomes south. The south becomes north. The shield collapses for a period of time, maybe centuries, maybe just years, and then re-establishes itself. But during that collapse, the world is vulnerable. Solar flares that would normally be deflected can slam into the surface. The power grid would fry. The internet would vanish. The GPS constellation would fail. Civilization, as we know it, is built on delicate electronics. A magnetic reversal would send us back to the Stone Age in an afternoon. But for the first civilization, the threat was different. They didn't have an electrical grid to lose. They've had the planet itself. If the magnetic field unlocks the crust, if the glue holding the shell to the core loosens, then the crustal displacement happens. This is the mechanism of the apocalypse. The magnetic field weakens. The poles wander. The Earth wobbles. And then the slip. The first civilization saw the signs. They were astronomers. They tracked the precession. They watched the sun rise in slightly the wrong place, year after year. They knew the cycle was ending. They built the pyramids to stabilize the grid's errors, if that theory holds. They built the underground cities to hide from the radiation. But they couldn't stop the slide. And now we are seeing the same signs, the weakening field, the wandering poles, the extreme weather, the volcanic activity rising. The South Atlantic anomaly is the ghost of the last shift, and the harbinger of the next one. Is this why the elites are building bunkers in New Zealand and Hawaii? Is this why the global seed vault is in Svalbard, buried deep in the rock? They are preparing for the reset. But this time, there is a difference. This time, the ice is melting elsewhere before the shift. In 1966, a man named Chan Thomas wrote a book called The Adam and Eve Story. It was a strange book. It proposed that the history of the world is cyclical, that every 6,000 to 12,000 years a pole shift occurs. He described the cataclysm in terrifying detail, the wind reaching supersonic speeds, the ocean sloshing over the continents like water in a tilted bowl, a mile-high wall of water sweeping across the US. He claimed that this is what destroyed Atlantis. This is what destroyed Noah's world, and he claimed that Jesus was one of the scholars of this lost knowledge, trying to warn people of the end of the age. The book was controversial. But the strangest part of the story is not what was in the book. It is what happened to it. The CIA classified it. They confiscated it. They locked a book about geology and history in a vault for 50 years. Why? Why would the Central Intelligence Agency care about a theory of pole shifts unless it contained a truth that was considered dangerous to national security? In 2013, a sanitized version was declassified and released. It was heavily redacted. What were they hiding? Perhaps they were hiding the timeline. If the cycle is 12,000 years, and the last cataclysm, the Younger Dryas, was 12,000 years ago, do the math. We are due. We are living on borrowed time. The great year of the zodiac, the 26th Voronezh year precession cycle, is split into seasons. We are approaching the winter solstice of the galaxy. The first civilization lived in the Golden Age. Then came the Silver. Then the Bronze. We are living in the Iron Age, the Kali Yuga, the Age of Destruction. The CIA knows this. The Vatican knows this. The governments with their Antarctic bases know this. Antarctica is the scorecard. It is the only place where the record is preserved. By drilling into the ice, they can see exactly when the last shift happened. They can measure the carbon dioxide, the dust, the pollen. They have the calendar, and they aren't sharing it with us. Imagine the panic if the President of the United States went on television and said, "My fellow Americans, we have found evidence in Antarctica that the Earth undergoes a violent crustal slip every 12 millennia. The last one was 12,800 years ago. The magnetic field is collapsing now. We estimate we have 20 years left." The stock market would hit zero in seconds. Laws would cease to exist. People would stop going to work. Society would crumble instantly. So they keep the secret. They maintain the illusion of continuity. Keep calm and carry on. Pay your taxes. Save for retirement. While they use that tax money to build black ships and dig deep tunnels in the ice, they are building the Ark. And we are not on the passenger list. This is the dark heart of the Antarctic mystery. It is not just about the past. It is about the survival of the species. The first civilization failed. They were wiped out. Only a handful of refugees survived to teach the hunter-gatherers how to stack stones. This time, the breakaway civilization wants to do better. They want to save the technology. They want to save the genetic stock. But they have decided that they cannot save everyone, so they are hoarding the resources of the planet, the vril, the ancient tech, the maps in the safest place on Earth, the place that has already been destroyed, Antarctica. It is the perfect shelter. It is geologically stable. Ironically, it is isolated. It is defensible, and it is already frozen. If the pole shift happens, and Antarctica moves to the equator, it will melt, it will become green again. It will be the new Garden of Eden, and the current temperate zones, North America, Europe, will slide to the pole and freeze. New York will be the new Antarctica. Antarctica will be the new Brazil. They are simply moving to the future real estate. Let's step away from the disaster movie scenario for a moment. Let's look at the mind. Why do we refuse to see this? Why, when we see a map from 1513 showing an ice-free coast, do we say, coincidence? Why, when we see a pyramid in the snow, do we say, wind erosion? Why, when we find a skull that is twice the size of a human's, do we say, head binding? It is a psychological defense mechanism. Scientists call it ontological shock. It is the trauma of having your reality shattered. If we admit that the first civilization existed, we have to admit that we are not special. We are not the pinnacle of progress. We are just the latest attempt. If we admit that they were wiped out by a cycle, we have to admit that we are powerless. That nature is a monster that can shake us off like fleas whenever it wants. And if we admit that there are others, watchers, inner earthers, aliens, we have to admit that we are not the top of the food chain. Humans hate feeling powerless. We hate feeling small, so we edit the data. We blur the satellite photos. We classify the books. We ridicule the whistleblowers. We build a comfortable, safe little box of history where Christopher Columbus discovered America and the pyramids were built with copper chisels. It is a bedtime story. It makes us feel safe. But Antarctica is the monster under the bed. It is the cold, hard truth that refuses to go away. The ice is a mirror. When we look into it, we see ourselves. But we see ourselves dead, frozen, forgotten. It terrifies us, but it should also liberate us. Because if we know the truth, we can prepare. If we know the cycle exists, we can survive it. We have technology now that the first civilization didn't have. We have spaceflight. We have the internet. We have the ability to store knowledge in the cloud, or in DNA. We don't have to lose everything this time, but we can only survive if we wake up. The disclosure that everyone is waiting for, the government admitting to UFOs or ancient ruins, might not be a press conference. It might be the ice itself. The ice is the ultimate whistleblower. It does not care about non-disclosure agreements. It does not care about elections. It just melts. And every drop of water that runs off the glacier brings us 1 inch closer to the reveal. The clock is ticking. The shield is cracking. The magnets are moving. The planet is getting ready to roll the dice again. And down in the south, in the silence of the white continent, the ruins are waiting to see if we pass the test this time, or if we will just be another layer of fossils for the next civilization to find. We are almost done. We have travelled from the surface to the core, from the past to the future. There is only one thing left to do. We must synthesize it. We must take all these fragments, the maps, the skulls, the pyramids, the aliens, the cycles, and put them into a single, coherent picture. We must tell the full story of the first civilization, who they were, how they lived, and exactly how they died. And finally, we must say goodbye to the world we thought we knew. We have spent hours examining the crime scene. We have looked at the fingerprints of the cataclysm, the frozen bodies, and the shattered maps. But to truly understand what was lost, we must stop looking at the ruins. We must look at the life. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to dissolve the ice, erase the miles of white silence. Erase the explorers, the bases, and the treaties. Let us turn the clock back 13,000 years. We are drifting down into the heart of the Gamburtsev Valley. It is the height of the Antarctic summer. But here, summer is not a season of heat. It is a season of light. The sun does not set. It circles the horizon, bathing the valley in an eternal, golden twilight. The air is cool, crisp, and rich with oxygen. It smells of pine resin, damp fern, and ozone. Below us lies the city. It is not a city of glass and steel like New York or Tokyo. It does not scrape the sky with arrogance. It works with the earth. The buildings are massive, carved from the living granite of the mountains. They use the polygon style we see in Peru and Egypt, massive, irregular stones fitted together so perfectly that they look like a natural cliff face. But these stones are polished. They gleam in the low sun, and they are inlaid with metals, gold, silver, and orichalcum that catch the light and channel the energy of the earth. In the center of the city stands the pyramid. It is capped with a crystal stone, perhaps a massive diamond, or a quartz lens that glows with a soft, pulsing blue light. It is not a tomb, it is the heartbeat of the civilization. You hear a low hum in the air, a vibration that you feel in your teeth. It is the sound of the pyramid drawing power from the telluric currents of the crust. The people moving through the streets are tall, strikingly tall. The rulers, the Shemsu Hor, stand 7 or 8 feet in height. They move with a slow, liquid grace. Their heads are elongated, wrapped in intricate turbans or adorned with feathers. Their hair burns red like copper wire. They are the aristocracy of the mind. They do not carry weapons. They carry instruments of measurement, sextants, rods, crystals. They are wearing fabrics we would not recognize, spun from fibers that are stronger than silk and warmer than wool. Walk with me through the market. There is no money here. There is no barter. This is a post-scarcity civilization. Energy is free, drawn from the earth. Food is abundant, grown in the geothermal greenhouses that line the valley walls. The people are working, but they are not toiling. They are crafting. Here, a mason is cutting a block of granite that weighs 50 tons. But he is not using a chisel. He is using a device that looks like a tuning fork. He strikes it, and the sound focuses a vibration so intense that the rock softens like clay. He shapes it with a trowel. This is the lost technology of sonic levitation. We have legends of this all over the world. In Tibet, monks moving rocks with trumpets. In Jericho, walls falling down from the sound of horns. In Egypt, myths of the gods singing the stones into place. Here, in the Antarctic Valley, it is just physics. They understand that matter is just energy vibrating at a slow rate. If you match the frequency, you can alter the matter. You can make a stone float. Watch as a massive block drifts silently through the air, guided by the sound, settling into the wall with a soft thud. It is a civilization of harmony. They are not conquering nature. They are tuning it. Let us travel to the coast, to the shores of the Ross Sea, which is now an ice shelf, but was then a thriving bay. Here lies the port of the Sea Kings. The ships docked here are not primitive rafts. They are masterworks of engineering. Massive, ocean-going vessels with hulls made of cedar and reinforced with metal. They have sails, yes, but they also have something else. A central pillar, a mast wrapped in copper coil, perhaps utilizing the atmospheric electricity, the St. Elmo's fire, to aid navigation or propulsion. These are the ships that mapped the world. Imagine the briefing room in the captain's quarters. A navigator spreads out a map. It is drawn on skin. It shows the entire globe. They know about the Americas. They know about Africa. They know about the strange, misty islands of the north, Britain. Their mission is not trade. It is stewardship. They are the global survey. They sail out from Antarctica, riding the currents. They land on the shores of primitive lands. Imagine the encounter. A hunter-gatherer in Mesopotamia, wearing animal skins, holding a flint spear, looks up. He sees a massive ship with shimmering sails glide into the river. He sees giants walk down the gangplank. Men who are clean-shaven, wearing robes of spun gold, holding tools that shine. He drops to his knees. He thinks they are gods. The gods. Do not enslave him. They teach him. They show him how to stack mud bricks to make a wall that won't fall down. They give him seeds, wheat, barley that have been genetically modified in the Antarctic labs to grow large and fast. They teach him the stars. Look up, they say. When that star rises, the river will flood. Plant your seeds then. They are the civilizing heroes, owners, Osiris, Veracocha, Quetzalcoatl. They stay for a season. They build a megalithic marker, calling card, of polygon stone to prove they were there. And then they leave. They sail back south, back to the Crystal City. This was the golden age of legend, a time when the gods walked among men. It wasn't magic. It was just a disparity in technology, like a modern scientist landing a helicopter in a remote tribe in the Amazon. To the tribe, it is a miracle. To the pilot, it is just a Tuesday. But the Sea Kings had a secret. They weren't just teaching. They were collecting. They were collecting DNA. They were collecting seeds. They were collecting data on the Earth's magnetic field. Because the astronomers in the Crystal City had seen the numbers. Back in the city, the mood has changed. The High Council is meeting in the pyramid. The chief astronomer points to the star charts. He points to the pendulum that tracks the Earth's wobble. It is coming, he says. The great year is ending. The cycle is resetting. The magnetic field is weakening. The crust is unlocking. They calculate the trajectory of the torrid meteor stream. They realize that the Earth is about to pass through a debris field. They know they cannot stop it. They are masters of stone and sound, but they are not masters of the cosmos. They cannot steer the planet. So, they make a decision. They initiate Project Ark. They cannot save the city. The city will be crushed by the ice or drowned by the wave. They cannot save the people. There are too many, but they can save the knowledge. They begin to build the libraries, not books of paper that will rot, but books of gold, books of crystal. They carve the secrets of mathematics, astronomy, and agriculture onto indestructible tablets. They seal them in halls of records. One is buried deep beneath the Sphinx in Egypt, a colony they established for this purpose. One is buried in the jungles of the Yucatan. And the main one, the Master Archive, is sealed in the deepest cavern of the Gamburtsev Mountains. They coat the walls with resin to waterproof them. They seal the doors with sonic locks that can only be opened by the right frequency. And then they prepare the diaspora. They choose the best and the brightest, the strongest genetic lines. You must go, they tell them. You must scatter. Go to the high mountains of Peru. Go to the highlands of Ethiopia. Go to the Himalayas. Wait for the water to recede, and then start again. It is a somber exodus. The ships leave the harbour for the last time, heavily laden with supplies and artifacts. They look back at the shining city, knowing they will never see it again. The families say goodbye. The giants who stay behind know their fate. They are the captains going down with the ship. They stand on the balconies of their stone palaces, watching the sky, waiting for the flash. The end comes exactly as predicted. A blinding light in the north, a shockwave that circles the globe. Then the wobble, the lurch. The ground under the Crystal City groans. The harmonic hum of the pyramid screams into a high pitch and then dies. The sky changes colour. The sun, which was circling the horizon, suddenly dips and vanishes. The wind hits. The flash frees. It captures them in a snapshot of tragedy. A mother shielding her child, a scholar clutching a tablet, an astronomer looking through his telescope. The snow falls, the ice builds, and the silence descends. The city of the crystal becomes the city of the ghost. The golden age is over. The ice age has begun, and for 12,000 years the snow covers the towers. The glaciers grind over the roofs. The humans who survived in the rest of the world, the primitive tribes who watched the gods die, forget the details. They turn the history into myth. The Crystal City becomes Atlantis. The High Council becomes Mount Olympus. The technology becomes magic. We forget. Until we invent satellites. Until we invent ground-penetrating radar. Until we look down and see the shadow of a city under the ice, and we realize that the myth is real. And if the myth is real, the cycle is real. We are not looking at a fantasy. We are looking at a warning. What happened to them will happen to us, unless we learn to read the ice. This brings us to the final question, the question that haunts the scientists at Vostok and the generals at the Pentagon. If the cycle is cyclical, and if the Watchers survived in the deep caverns, are they trying to help us survive the next one, or are they preparing to take their planet back? We have one final section, one final thought to leave you with tonight as you drift off to sleep. The conclusion. The philosophical weight of the ice. We have seen the evidence. Now we must decide what it means for the human soul. There is a term in psychology called dissociative amnesia. It happens when a person experiences a trauma so severe, so overwhelming, that their mind simply shuts down. To protect itself, the brain deletes the memory. It walls it off. The person goes on living, but there is a gap, a shadow in their history that they cannot explain. Humanity is a species with amnesia. We walk around this planet acting as if we own it. We act as if we are the first intelligent beings to ever build a city, or write a book, or map the stars. But deep down, in the darkest corners of our collective subconscious, we know that isn't true. Why else do we dream of falling? Why do we have a universal fear of the dark? Why does every culture on Earth, no matter how isolated, have a story about a great flood? A story about a lost paradise? A story about dragons? Comets in the sky? These are not fairy tales. They are trauma memories. They are the fragments of the nightmare that ended the first civilization. We are the descendants of the survivors, and like children of war refugees, we carry the scars of our ancestors, even if we don't remember the war itself. We look at the Great Pyramid, and we feel a strange sense of loss. We look at the vast, white silence of Antarctica, and we feel a shiver that has nothing to do with the cold. It is the feeling of homesickness. For 12,000 years, we have been wandering in the wilderness. We forgot how to build the polygon walls. We forgot how to speak to the stones. We forgot the map of the stars. We started over. We invented the wheels again. We invented writings again. We built cities of mud and brick, trying to mimic the crystal towers of the past. But we never quite got it right. We built for war. They built for harmony. We conquered nature. They tuned nature. But now the amnesia is lifting. The ice is melting. The evidence is surfacing. The black night is beeping. We are remembering who we were. And that is a terrifying process. Waking up is always painful. The light hurts your eyes. The truth hurts your ego. If we accept that Antarctica was the cradle, then we have to accept that we are not the masters of the earth. We are the tenants. and the lease is coming up for renewal. Arthur C. Clarke famously said, "Vov, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." If you showed an iPhone to a medieval peasant, he would call it witchcraft. He would burn you at the stake. But if you showed an iPhone to a quantum physicist, he would simply ask about the battery life. The first civilization looked like magicians to the hunter-gatherers. They could float stones. They could navigate by invisible lines. They could heal with light, but it wasn't magic. It was science, a different branch of science than the one we chose. We chose the path of explosion. We burn coal. We burn oil. We split atoms. Our technology is based on fire and force. They chose the path of vibration. They used sound. They used resonance. They used magnetism. Their technology was based on flow and frequency. For millennia, we thought their path was lost. But look around you. We are circling back. We are beginning to understand quantum mechanics. We are building metamaterials that can bend light invisibility cloaks. We are experimenting with acoustic levitation in labs. We are rediscovering the magic. We are building a global brain, the internet that rivals the telepathy of the Vril. We are building AI that rivals the wisdom of the Watchers. We are becoming the gods we used to worship. This is the test. The cycle doesn't just destroy, it teaches. It is a spiral. We come back to the same point, but at a higher level. The question is, have we learned enough to survive this time? The first civilization was advanced, yes, but they still fell. Maybe they were arrogant. Maybe they ignored the warnings until it was too late. Or maybe they realized that the physical world is temporary. Maybe the ascension that the New Age philosophies talk about is not a spiritual metaphor, but a technological reality. Did the missing people of the Crystal City die, or did they upload? Did they transition into the inner earth? Not as physical refugees, but as consciousness. Is the hollow earth actually a higher dimension, a frequency domain that sits right on top of ours, invisible to our eyes, but accessible to the mind? Maybe they are walking alongside us right now. Maybe the aliens are just the seniors of the human race, watching the juniors learn to walk. They are waiting for us to stop fighting, to stop burning the planet, to stop acting like scared animals. They are waiting for us to become noble again, to become Arya. And when we do, the ice will melt, the doors will open, and the reunion will begin. Antarctica is a mirror. It reflects our face. When we look at it, we see what we want to see. The oil companies see resources. The military sees a fortress. The scientists see a lab. The dreamers see Atlantis. But the ice doesn't care what we see. The ice just is. It is the keeper of the clock. Every layer of snow is a tick of the second hand. Every ice age is an hour. Every cataclysm is a day. We are living in the final seconds of the cosmic day. The sun is setting on our current epoch. The magnetic field is the twilight. It is easy to feel fear, to look at the doomsday clock and despair. But there is beauty in the cycle. Forests burn down so that new trees can grow. Stars explode to create the carbon in our bodies. Civilizations fall so that new ones can rise. We are part of an eternal rhythm. We are not separate from the earth. We are the earth dreaming. And right now, the earth is dreaming of Antarctica. It is dreaming of the time when the poles were green, when the lions walked in the snow, when the pyramids sang. The dream is becoming real again. As the climate warms, the green will return. The moss is already growing on the Antarctic peninsula. The grass is spreading. The continent is waking up from its long hibernation. It is shaking off the white blanket. And as it wakes, it is challenging us. Are you ready? It asks. Are you ready to know the truth about your past? Are you ready to take responsibility for your future? Are you ready to meet the family? We can choose to be afraid. We can choose to hide in our cities and pretend the water isn't rising. Or we can choose to be explorers. We can choose to be like Piri Reis, drawing maps of the unknown, like Yui T. Rangiora, sailing into the frozen mist. We can choose to embrace the mystery, because the mystery is not out there. It is in us. The DNA of the giants is in our blood. The memory of the stars is in our minds. We are the first civilization. We just forgot. And now it is time to remember. The night is long. The wind is cold. But the dawn is coming. Not the dawn of the sun, but the dawn of memory. Let us go to the final resting place. Let us wrap this story in the velvet of the night. Let us close the book of the ice. And so, we return to where we began, to the ice. We have travelled a great distance tonight. We have journeyed through time, peeling back the layers of the centuries like pages in a book of snow. We stood on the deck of Piri Reis's ship, looking at a coastline that should not have been there. We walked through the lush, green rainforests of the Ocene, smelling the pine and the damp earth, watching the sun filter through the leaves of trees that are now ghosts. We sat in the cockpit with the pilots of the Schwabenland, seeing the thermal vents rising from the white desert. We felt the ground shake with the impact of the falling sky, and we shivered in the sudden, brutal silence of the flash freeze. We have touched the smooth, cold stones of the pyramids. We have stared into the hollow eyes of the Paracas skulls. We have listened to the beeping of the black night satellite. It is a heavy story. It is a story of rise and fall, of glory and tragedy. But now the story is done. The maps are rolled up. The radar screens are turned off. The books are closed. We are left with the landscape. Look at it one last time in your mind's eye. The white horizon, the endless plateau. The sun circling low in the sky, casting long, purple shadows across the snowdrifts. It is a place of absolute purity. Whatever lies beneath it, be it cities or machines or merely rock, the surface remains untouched. It is the blank page at the end of the book. There is a comfort in this emptiness. The world is full of noise, full of traffic, full of data, full of shouting. But here, there is only the wind. The wind does not care about history. It does not care about civilizations. It simply blows. It smooths the snow. It erases the footprints. It reminds us that everything is temporary. The greatest towers we build will eventually fall. The loudest songs we sing will eventually fade. The strongest empires will eventually become dust or ice. This is not a sad thought. It is a peaceful one. It means that we do not have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. The world carries itself. The cycle turns. The seasons change. The ice advances and the ice retreats. We are just passengers. As you lie there now, safe in your bed, warm under your covers, let the image of the cold continent fade. You do not need to solve the mystery tonight. The mystery has waited for 12,000 years. It can wait for one more night. The pyramids are sleeping. The kings are sleeping. The dragon in the cave is sleeping. And now it is your turn. Let your body sink into the mattress. Feel the gravity pulling you down, anchoring you, just as the gravity anchors the ice to the pole. Let the tension drain out of your muscles. Start with your feet. Let them be heavy. Let them be still. Move up to your legs, your hips, your back. Let the knot in your stomach loosen. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Unclench your jaw. Relax your tongue. Smooth out the space between your eyebrows. Your breathing is slow, deep, rhythmic, in and out, like the tide under the ice shelf, rising and falling, in and out. There is nothing you need to do right now. There is nowhere you need to go. You are safe. You are warm. You are still. Think about the silence of the Vostok cavern, the deep blue stillness of the water that hasn't moved in 15 million years. That silence is inside you now. A deep, quiet pool of rest. The questions of the day are floating on the surface, far above you. You are sinking down, down, into the quiet. The history of the world is a dream. A long, complex dream of fire and ice. But you are waking up from the dream of history and drifting into the dream of sleep. Let the snow fall in your mind. Soft. White. Silent. It covers the noise. It covers the worry. It covers the time, one flake at a time, layer upon layer, until everything is smooth, until everything is white, until everything is silent. The ice keeps its secrets. It holds them tight in its frozen grip, preserved, protected, waiting. One day, the thaw will come. One day, the truth will rise. But not tonight. Tonight, the vault is sealed. Tonight, the door is locked. Tonight, there is only the peace of the long winter. Rest now, traveller. The journey is over. The stars are watching overhead, just as they watched the first civilization, just as they watched the refugees, just as they watch you. They are the only witness, and they never speak. Good night.